Untamed is going to be untamed. It's going to be a little crazy. I want to talk to my people. I want to talk to my brothers and sisters. We can have grace and humility in how we interact with other people.
Oh, hot dog, look at you.
And nobody talked about what's really happening.
And let's have conversations about what truth is.
Well, today we've got a lot going on. It's going to be complete chaos, much like what we're dealing with right now. You know, I tried really hard to sit on the sidelines and say everything's going to be okay. Pam Bondi's just dealing with, you know, bad hens in the hen house. But then the case against Comey fell apart, and then after the case against Comey fell apart, the case against Letitia James, which, by the way, was a slam dunk. There was no bigger slam dunk than Letitia James. Did she or did she not commit fraud? She did. And the statute of limitations for that case did not run out. But did they try to refile it? They did not. And they made it look like it was incompetence, but it wasn't incompetence at all. Today we're gonna go over a few things. Stolen elections have consequences. Stolen election has consequences. And there is a shocking loss that happened in Trump strongholds like Miami. But we're going to have the conversation. People are sick of it. They're sick of the Democrats. They're sick of the Republicans. All the leadership is shit. The judges are rotted to the core. And the DOJ is doing everything they can to stand in the way of progress. Democrats, at least you got to give it to them. They will push the limit. We're going to charge 1,800 people with a 1512 charge. We're going to hold them in the gulag. We're going to give them long prison sentences. And yeah, did the Supreme Court step in and say, no, you can't do that. That's an illegal charge. Yeah, they did. But not before they got their pound of flesh. We can't even get a 70-year-old Gold Star mom. Pam Bondi makes the announcement, I'm going to look into what's happening in Colorado. I'm going to look and see. Let's look under the hood. Let's see if when we look under the hood, if there's any sort of malfeasance and people being mistreated inside the jail system. Of course they're being mistreated. You got the cartels running the hen house. What did you think was going to happen? And now you want to act in this day that all of a sudden now you're concerned about elderly people and children. We're in a different world right now, completely different world. I want to unpack a bunch of things. And we also have this, we have Patrick Byrne's video and his revelations. If you haven't seen this, you're going to want to hit the share button and you're going to want to hear what I already put it out there. Where do I start? But we also have a guest that's going to be with us. So I just want you to know we have a guest who's awesome. He's been on here before with us. It's Dr. William Federer. He's a best-selling author of Socialism, History to Present, and Voice of America Minute. He's going to trace the tyranny all the way back to Plato. You know, I had some harsh questions for him last time. I have some more this time. But let's just dive into it. Get started. Here's a post that I put up on X. Stolen elections have consequences, even in Florida. So this is Republicans lose the Miami mayoral race for the first time in nearly 30 years at a 12-point Trump state house district in Georgia was flipped tonight. Meanwhile, Republicans are just brushing it all aside. No big deal, they say. They've got midterms in the bag, they say. Nothing to see here, nothing to tweak. Just keep sending them campaign cash, they said. They're irrevocably broken. The Republican Party is the Democrat Party, the radical left, wearing sheep's clothing. President Trump, in a hot minute, said that he can't get anything done because they're standing in the way. Here's a post I put up that I also put up on X this morning. I was kind of on a tear this morning. And this one had to do with Patrick Byrne. And we're going to play this video in a second. Let me tell you what I said. This is why Patrick once texted me, you were right about everything. So much more to come out, but pay attention to the last thing he said in this video. It's time to destroy these evildoers. Let's go ahead and play it.
You just told us that you are CIA, sir. So how would you describe your role with the CIA, which you haven't revealed before?
Well, again, I was telling the truth when I said they frequently was reminded that you have a really non-standard relationship. You have that. It became kind of my mother relationship. I had lots of relationships across the government, but eventually I went from there to by 2010, 2011, Obama, I became something called a tier 1 intelligence asset. And then in 2010, 2011, Obama elevated me to national intelligence asset. I was told I was going to be the ace in the hole for all kinds of, for the real tough situations from 2010, that was after working for Brennan for 4 or 5 years. And then I continued doing all that stuff through 2016. And all this crazy stuff happened that I've told you about, where we set up the Russian hoax. That's why, I've talked around it because I was trying to hide that. But I've told these stories about how I got drawn into setting up the Russian hoax and the Hillary this and that. There was a little bit of fibbing there. I didn't want to explain the whole truth. I was doing that. I didn't just stumble into it. I was their go-to asset. I was the national intelligence asset. First, I got pulled under Brennan in 2006, and then 2011, I got moved into the White House. That's why I got mixed up in the Russian collusion and the Hillary stuff.
And there's actually a docu-series that General Michael Flynn produced about your life story, and this will make more sense now that you've shared this information if you go back and watch that docu-series. But why are you sharing this information now, Patrick? As we're looking at Venezuela, we're talking about a rigged election. It seems to me that you feel that this is an important part of you that you need to let the people know. Why?
I've danced around long enough, and it's not working. And the regret of my life is that I spent the first Trump term trying to dance around within my constraints. Buffett said, Patrick, when I went to see him, who was like my rabbi, he said, Patrick, just go on television and tell everything. And I just said I couldn't do that, but I went and told enough trying to shape. And I've had enough. We're having insurrection. We have an insurrection going on.
We have an insurrection going on. There's a thing called the Insurrection Act. President Trump is going to have to enact emergency powers. They've eroded every part of our government. They've eroded every part of our leadership. We are represented by some of the weakest people you'd ever find. But if you were trying to destroy the United States, you would do exactly what they're doing. By the way, there's also a video out there right now that's floating around that might be of Rick Gurnell having sex with a 14, 15-year-old boy. Because people on our side are all, they're all good people. But nobody ever picks it up. Nobody ever picks up the hard stories. They don't talk about the election fraud. They don't talk about the whistleblowers. You can tell by who's on the side of the American people by what is or is not being said. As I sit here and talk to you, I get more and more discouraged. I get discouraged by a lot of things. By the way, let's just do this really quick. Patrick Byrne was on InfoWars, and he had this to say. Let's play it.
How do you know so much about what's going on?
Well, you know how I've explained before many times that while I had this sort of academic relationship with the United States, which was the honor of my life with the United States government, it's nothing about intelligence. I've got a red line between me and the CIA, et cetera, et cetera. You've heard me explain all that, right? Right, Alex?
Yes.
Okay, I was lying. I am CIA. I was CIA. I did have that normal relationship, that weird relationship with the government, as I described, after 9/11.
And so why are you bringing that out today?
Because I am going after the deep state. I know all these stuff. And
by the way, General Flynn has vouched for you on this, so he can see the files.
I've just sent a letter over the past several years.
Sorry, we should have trimmed the video. I apologize, but you get the point. And then Alex Jones, or excuse me, then, man, there's so much stuff that I want to tell you about this. It's crazy. And here's Patrick Burns talking about domestic extremist threat number one. Play it.
My name is Patrick Byrne, domestic extremist threat number one, or not. We're starting to realize the feds were using Maria to smudge up the Republican Party, and they were using me to use Maria. And this truth is going to be so explosive.
If you do this long enough, you begin to feel like an enemy of your own country.
Civilization all begins with the rule of law. And once that gets corrupted, it's like my worst fears have just been realized. I don't know, maybe I'm just being sensitive.
That's the docuseries that just came out. I trust Patrick Byrne. I trust Patrick Byrne because over the last 5 years, the money that the CIA gave him, he gave it back. And he gave it back with a pound of flesh to come with it. He basically said, listen, I'm not going to sell out my country. And he saw it was a road too deep to walk down. And what he just said about you become an enemy of your own country. There's many people that would sell out their own grandmother, that smother them with a pillow, just because it would give them a bag of shekels. That's what our leadership has become. Voting machines, mail-in ballots. It's all happening. The fraud is right there in front of us. It's easy to see. It's impossible to ignore, and yet the media and these pieces of shit walk around telling us there's nothing to see here. They sit there and they call it misinformation, disinformation. You got guys like Kyle Clark that instead of talking about the truth and say that, hey, the MAGA podcaster once elected leaders in Colorado tried for treason and hung. Found guilty, he wants them to hang. No. It goes straight to political violence. But the people are not political. The everyday people walking down the streets, they don't give a shit about politics. You know what they care about? They care about the fact that you don't take 56 cents on every dollar from their family. They care about the fact that they can actually afford to buy things in their community. They care about the fact that their kids get a proper education and don't get groomed and indoctrinated. They care about the fact that the first thing you don't do to their children when they walk in is say, let's give you an abortion. They care about peace and prosperity. They're no different than any other family around the entire world. If they could live a peaceful life with their family and have opportunity and do great things, they would want that. But no. We let the government create the very problem that they then say that they're here to solve. They let 10 million illegals into the country over 4 years, and now it's a savior mentality. We've got rid of 2 million. It's like Kabuki theater. We're the heroes to our own story. We're the antagonist and the protagonist. And we have people like Pam Bondi that I see in meetings with President Trump. And here's what she says. Well, Mr. President, we're doing such great things. We're cutting crime. You created the crime. You created it. You allowed judges to let people out on the streets to hurt Americans. You flooded the streets with fentanyl. You traded guns down in Mexico and let them be brought up only to hurt Americans. You eroded the education system. You legalized pornography at a rate that a child at age 4 can get on the internet and find it. You put books in schools to make kids curious about sexuality before their balls even dropped. You sexualized cartoons. You created animation. You made it easy for parents to put themselves their kids into vulnerable positions. And then you tell us, hey, we're here to help. We're going to solve the problems for you. Oh, by the way, we need a little bit more of your tax dollars. And then anytime we stand up like they did on January 6th, you send in your own group of people. Your own group of people, just send them on in, FBI, to set up the American people. And then you use the law, the 1512 argument from Enron, to lock up innocent Americans that had to redress a grievance. And then we said, hey, that's illegal. That's illegal. You're not allowed to do that. Why would you be allowed to do that? It's in the Constitution. That's illegal. Something is only illegal if you can redress your grievance, not through a system that treats you like a slave. And you want to know why they keep me quiet? I'm going to tell you why they keep me quiet. They keep me quiet because everything I just told you is not on my teleprompter. I don't have a teleprompter. It's basic common sense. The fact that they used Patrick Byrne and that he saw the writing on the wall and tried to undo years of things that they used him as a puppet shows me a lot about his character. But Tina Peters, let's just be honest. Everyone's saying, free Tina Peters. The entire country, short of people from other countries and bots that they created on X and Facebook and all the way down, they all say the same thing. What they've done to a 7-year-old Gold Star mom is abhorrent. You let criminals and pedophiles out with probation, and you lock up the woman that got to the bottom of election fraud by making a copy of her own system that Dominion was going to wipe. We have how many whistleblowers? How many? From Serbia. We got the head of intelligence from Venezuela that says, oh, by the way, Smartmatic brought that shit into your country, handed it over to Sequoia. And who ran that? But have they arrested that person too? Is Eric Coomer in shackles? No. They reward these people with a $787 million verdict. Settlement. And then you had Newsmax, and you had OAN, and you had Sidney Powell, and you had all these people that settled with the Satanist Coomer. But we're not allowed to see those either. Because they're like, yeah, that's not relevant what we settled for. And then you had this little prick get on the stand, aided by a judge in the Mike Lindell trial that did it in limine and eliminated all the evidence about Eric Coomer that says you can't defame a guy that's, frankly, just a piece of shit. How do you do it? How is that guy, how do you defame a guy that literally is a Satanist that writes about raping his wife and peeing on her and making her bark like a dog? How do you defame that guy? Who calls for the killing of police officers, posts the Antifa manifesto, and how much he hates Donald Trump? And how do you, if you're the New York Times, justify running a puff piece about him and walking by all the evidence? And how, if you were the media, and Eric Coomer was arrested for what can only be described as a DUI and fleeing the scene and lying, which is a felony, but you didn't report on any of it. But you're super interested in reporting on anything, this guy got a speeding ticket. Oh my gosh, he was doing 75 and a 55. That was actually a story in Colorado. A guy was driving 75 and a 55 and they caught him on a drone. Maybe it was 85 or 95. But they eviscerated this young man over that, but can't report on things having to do with national security or the interest of the people. They pick and choose winners and losers. They pick and choose winners and losers with Tina Peters too. And they put her in jail. And then Pam Bondi, oh, you gotta love Pam Bondi. She comes out and let's just examine the jails in Colorado. You stupid shits knew that the jails, not just in Colorado, but around the country, aren't fit for rats. You were told with the J6ers that the jails weren't fit for rats. And you know what you did? Nothing, because you didn't give a rat's ass about any of them, unless it gave you some sort of political will with the people. And Vandersteel put this out. Tina Peters is the key. Peter Tickton said her evidence is essential. Venezuelan general's letter to Trump. Carvajal says Smartmatic was used to alter elections. Alcala says parallel systems were used to change vote totals. Tina Peters' images are the American copy of this pattern. This is why 2 American F-18s just buzzed Venezuelan airspace within the last hour. When are we gonna admit the truth and let these pieces of shit stop sitting on the sidelines and holding back an agenda that the American people overwhelmingly voted for? Overwhelmingly. They couldn't cheat in the 2024 election. And look, it's not just, it has nothing to do with the fact that it just has to do with the election of President Trump. We just lost a 30-year seat. They lost in January of 2025, this January, in a special election, a seat in an area of Pennsylvania that hasn't since the 1970s been Democrat. And you want to tell me that the system is not systematically now just stealing elections with impunity? We know it is. We know it is. And you don't do jack shit about it other than let the media tell you that, oh, just so you know, it's now owned by a Republican. It's Liberty. It's Liberty votes now. While the guy writes an email that says it's business as usual, different name, same system. He wrote that. Liberty votes. Here's a post that I put up. It says, at some point, we just have to say enough is enough. We are there, paper tigers running the clock, time to stop pretending it's 4D chess. It's not. It's purposeful destruction. And that's underneath something else that I said. Look, if you don't like the fact that I'm telling Pam Bondi to f off, let me just tell you something. My patience for you being offended by that, but not offended by the fact that a 7-year Gold Star mom is rotting in jail. We can drop bombs on different countries. We can do peace deals all over the Middle East. And we can't get a 70-year-old Gold Star mom out of jail? Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, and don't tell me it's President Trump doing it. It's your obstructionists that are doing it. You all are doing it. The Benny Johnsons and everyone else out in the world saying, free Tina Peters. Free Tina, let's look into the jails in Colorado. Well, that does a lot of good. Just run the clock for another 3 years. And President Trump knows now you're running the clock. He knows now. He knows that you're entrenched, and every decision he makes, you guys get on your secret phones, you make phone calls, and you're like, hey, listen, I need you to slow this down for me, create a little chaos. Here, but just put an attorney on it that can get kicked off by a judge because they weren't properly appointed. Do that. Yes, because then we can run the clock and Comey can get off. That's what happened. And that is what continues to happen. Put my post back up if you would. I responded to this. Get the bottom one if you would, because I want to see. Okay, Attorney General. So Attorney General Pam Bondi put up, I've directed my Civil Rights Division under, I don't know who that is, to investigate Colorado's prison system following reports of unconstitutional conditions. We'll be we will share findings as they become available and ensure that the civil rights of prisoners are protected. So here's what I wrote. Is this a joke? Stop stonewalling the president and get some progress made. It's increasingly obvious you are not interested in arresting the election crime syndicate and freeing Tina Peters. For sake, the entire judicial system in Colorado is compromised and constitutionally rotted to the core. They can see it. They can see it bare-eyed from Mars. But let me know how Fox News is tomorrow. We not want you to break a nail defending the people. That's what we're up against right now. That's what we're up against right now. And you could sit here and tell me that's not what we're up against, but go ahead, tell me it's not what we're up against. Tell me that's not what's happened 11 months later when President Trump literally said, I can't get anything done, you just run the clock. You can't even get the Senate leader and the House leader to convene to recess so that President Trump can do a recess appointment. You won't even do that. That's the left at work. And let's not even get started over the fact of what they've done to Charlie Kirk. And now we're not supposed to know. And in the absence of not telling us anything, almost like you're going back to the shooting in Las Vegas at the MGM. You remember that? We still don't know anything about it. But no, trust us because we're the FBI. Trust us because we're the DOJ. We're here to protect your interests. Oh yeah, we're reducing crime. You're reducing crime that you created over and over and over again. You loosen the belt around people's neck. You let the vicious dogs out on the street. And then you say, I'm coming in here. I'm going to solve the problem for you. You haven't solved a thing. And President Trump, I don't know what you do at this point. Because the second that you start firing people, you got to then run the clock back through the Congress that are going to slow you down on the appointments to replace them. Can't win. Checkmate. They played chess. We played checkers. We have them dead to rights. But you got a DOJ that literally will not trip over themselves to do the right thing by the American people. You know what? I don't want to hear Pam Bondi's in a bad spot. No, she's not. She's at the place getting her nails done and then hanging out on Fox News. That's what Pam Bondi is doing. Todd Blanche, oh, you know what? He's just a country club guy. He doesn't care if you're Republican or Democrat. He serves himself. And I'm done hearing that somewhere along the line, we're going to have judges step in and do the right thing. They haven't. They have someone's back that they need to scrub, and it will not be the American people. So, you know, I'm pissed. I'm pissed off that Tina Peters is still in jail, and I'm pissed off that we keep being glad-handed and they just dangle a little bit more. Here, let's just dangle this out there and see if we can just calm them down for another 30 days. Let's run the clock so we can get into 2026 so there's nothing we can do about the mail-in ballots, and there's nothing we can do about the machines. You already have a state of Colorado and other blue states that are saying, we're not going to give you any access to any of the voter information, which, by the way, is used for federal elections. You didn't do anything about that. You didn't arrest her, and you should. But we haven't done that either. Man, I'm fired up. I'm fired up and I'm pissed off. And I'm not pissed off for me, I'm pissed off for you. I'm pissed off for you because you'll have people say over and over again, hey, we're just fed up. The GOP is about as anemic as it comes. Do we even know who runs the GOP? Do you know who runs the GOP? Have you even heard from them? No. But hold on, I got something for you. Check your phone. You're going to get another text message or go to your email. You're going to get another email where the GOP blows up your ass a bunch of hopium and tells you, hey, they got it all figured out. You know what they're doing is wrong when the average person sitting on the sidelines knows that you could solve a lot of these problems very quickly. You could literally eliminate the problems we have with ineffective leadership by reinstituting the Smith-Muntz Act, getting rid of this modernization part, and by allowing the people to have a seat at the table when they have their elections. Make them transparent. But you can't do that. Now you have to lock up a 70-year-old Gold Star mom, and you have to do everything you can to drive towards the end goal, which is the ultimate destruction of the United States. They have not pulled off the gas one bit. And what's worse is that the people on our side are actually the ones doing all the damage. I'm going to bring our guest in, and Dr. Federer I've had him on before. I told him I'd have him on again. I wanted to read his book, which is next on my list. I just got done reading Fred Galvin's book that talks about a few bad men. We'll put all of his stuff in so you can follow him. But Dr. Federer, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be with you. I appreciate your monologue there. You were right on.
You know, I think one of the things that irritates me the most is that we can all see it. President Trump can see it. He's very smart. And yet he feels like he's hogtied right now by leadership that are literally betraying the American people on a daily basis.
Yeah. A lot of deep state people that have been compromised. I did want to mention, I wrote a book on socialism, and I talk quite a bit in there on color revolutions and on how to overthrow countries. So for those not familiar, after World War II, you had countries in Europe wanting to be free. In India, right, set up republics, but the Soviet Union didn't like that. So they would send in agents to do what's called critical theory, where you would observe all the groups in a country, and then you would find out who the influencers were over those groups. And then you would co-opt the influencers, either by a campaign to find out who their friends are and befriend their friends, and then again introduce to them and sort of invite them to cocktail parties. And they did this in Hollywood in the 1950s, right? And they were able to plant their seeds of division. So they would do movies which were designed to divide the country, or they would use threats. So this bribe or the bullet, the silver or the lead, but they'd co-opt the influencers. And then they would begin to create crises. They would have the identify all the different groups and call them victims and oppressors, haves and have-nots, and they would pit them against each other to create bloodshed and rioting. And then they would get the influencers to blame the leader of the country for all the problems. And as people began to believe the media and the influencers, that the leader's popularity would fall. And when it fell enough, they would do a coup or a rigged election, and nobody would question it because by this time they didn't like the leader. And they would put in a Soviet puppet, and then the violence would stop, not realizing that it was the Soviets behind the violence. And then they would go through this honeymoon period, but when the dust settles, they would wake up and realize, we just gave away our country. And it's called behind the Iron Curtain. And so these tactics were used, and country after country fell. Truman does nothing. He thinks that the United Nations he helped form will bring world peace. But then you have Eisenhower, and then you have Iran. So Iran had a leader named the Shah. There's the father, and he was, after World War I, was pro-West. And he would let women dress in fashions, and he would let them have freedom and get education. And then when World War II started, the Shah did not kick out Germans. And so Britain and Russia were allies back then. They staged a coup and overthrew the Shah and put in a guy named Mossadegh. And so Mossadegh is now in for the rest of World War II and then afterwards. But he begins to side with the Soviet Union. And now the Cold War is going on. And Mossadegh nationalizes the oil industry in Iran, which means he takes it over. The problem was that in 1908 was formed the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. You know it better as BP. British Petroleum is the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. And so now that Mossadegh took over all of the Anglo-Iranian BP assets, Britain is having an oil shortage, so they appeal to Eisenhower. And Eisenhower approves of Operation Ajax. And he sends in Allen Dulles is the head of the CIA. He sends in Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the grandson of Teddy Roosevelt. And he is an expert in foreign languages. He goes to Tehran, and he does the KGB thing in reverse. He observes all the groups in the country. And he co-opts gangsters and mafia and all these organized crime people. And he organizes fighting between the haves and the have-nots and co-opts the media to blame Mossadegh for all the problems. And as his popularity falls, they put him under house arrest and lock him away for the rest of his life where he dies. And they replaced him with the Shah's son. And the Shah's son loved America and until Jimmy Carter pulled the rug out from under him. But these tactics during the Cold War were used for decades and perfected. And Obama turned them all inward on America. And so you mentioned the Smith-Mundt Act, and Obama signed the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, which allowed the government to prepare media to brainwash the public and push their narrative. And then Obama signed a executive order using behavioral science insights for the benefit of the American people. And it's like behavioral science insights, it's studying psychology of how people make decisions and manipulating them. And then Obama signed the Countering Foreign Propaganda and Disinformation Act, which gave him the authority to decide what's disinformation and cancel it in the same way that he had Lois Lerner turn the IRS to target conservatives. He began to have people in the federal government target conservatives for political purposes. And by the way, this is what every dictator does. They get in office and then they weaponize the country against their opponents. It's Latin, South America, Venezuela, right? They arrest all the media people, then they arrest the pastors because they don't want them talking about it, and then they end up setting up a dictatorship. But Obama,
we could talk about Eastern Europe, what they did in Africa. We can look at the interference that they did in changing the substructure of countries like Kenya just in the last decade, right? So I mean, they've done huge amounts of damage all over the world and used the same playbook. And frankly, Doc, they're using it here against our own people.
Yeah, and I have thought, okay, Charlie Kirk dies. and you have a tremendous amount of enthusiasm that's focused on what? Getting people back to church, getting married, having kids, and saving the country. And if Charlie were alive, he would be laser focused on the midterms. He thought politics. I mean, he was a strong Christian, but he thought politics. I had a chance to visit with Brooke Collins, the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, and she said Charlie was in my office, and he would be telling me who's the right person for this position and that position, and it's like he was amazing. What other person in their 20s would have that kind of access? And she says a lot of people are in positions because Charlie has recommended it. And so if Charlie were alive, he'd be laser focused on midterms. Well, what happened? All that energy has been sidetracked. And it's like, how did that happen? Well, they targeted influencers, and they got some very well-known names to sow division, right? So the influencer's job, whether they do it knowingly or unwittingly, their job is to sow division and get the conservatives fighting amongst themselves and not focusing on the midterms. And so we basically in 2 months went from this unbelievable enthusiasm of young people wanting to save the country to this infighting, this name calling, this chasing down. But the goal is to get Republicans to not focus on the midterms. And anyway, so we've been subject to a very massive psyops, because if they can win the midterms, that's all they care about.
If they win the midterms, we're done. The country's done. And we said that about 2024. President Trump won. We're on the seat of our chair, or on the edge of the chair, just trying to figure out why it is that the government officials can't see what is so obvious in front of us. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist. I'm sorry, you don't need to be a doctor in order to figure out what's happening in our country. You just have to have some institutional knowledge and understand academically what has been done historically for the last 100 years, let's say, even further. But let's just give it the last 100 years. And we're in a unique place right now where we have an opportunity to rip the Band-Aid off and call the insurrection what it is, and we have all the evidence. But Doc, we're not doing it. I mean, it's paralysis analysis. And it looks like and it smells like somebody running the clock. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. People with bad motives are attracted to power. And it's sort of like, if you can imagine like a clear plastic pipe with water inside, and whatever side is in power, they'll rush that way. And then if the other side's in power, they'll rush that way. So their allegiance is to kissing up to those with power. Here, I'm in Florida. Just yesterday, Miami elected a Democrat mayor for the first time in decades. Only 36,000 people turned out to vote.
Yeah, but it's not true. It's not true. It's absolutely not true that only 36,000 people showed up to vote. It's not true. I'm telling you right now, we just ran an entire mathematical equation on whether or not the math of it, or whether or not 36,000 people showed up. It's not true. Doc, I'm telling you right now, only 36,000 people did not just show up. And that's the great thing about having electronic voting machines, is that you can make things disappear, you can make votes disappear, you can shrink the vote turnout, you can use, what can be used for mail-in ballots to add to can also be used to take away.
Yeah, you're right. But the point I was making is that there's low enthusiasm on the Republican side. But yeah, the computer voting, I spent several years with Phyllis Schlafly, like we're talking decades ago, and I collecting voter fraud stories from all of our Eagle Forum members from all across the country. And I sorted through them, and there's so many ways to do computer voting fraud, with trapdoor programs, with ones that are day of the election software glitches, where you test it before or after the election day, it works perfect, but on the day of, to different levels of hidden software to steal it. Not mentioning that the modems are made by China, and they can have access to it. And anyway, the one saying that a person shared was, you can have accountability or anonymity. You can't have both. So if you want accountability, you have to know who the person was and who they voted for. I have a degree in accounting. You have to go back to the source transaction. But if you're gonna, and by the way, in America, they used to know how people would vote, but it was in the Deep South, the Democrats would lynch black people on their way to the polling booths because the blacks all voted Republican, and so they came up with the idea of, instead of carrying your sheet of paper called the ballot to the polling place, that they could search you down, pat you down, and find it, and instead they would have them pre-printed inside the polling place. And this was a way to try to get around. So Ulysses S. Grant actually passed the Ku Klux Klan Act because the Democrats were starting these vigilante groups. And but anyway, this idea that you used to know how people voted, but now they have the secret ballot. But now anyway, and then when they started making all those machines like in New York where you pulled the lever and it would turn all these gears, and they would find out that one little lead pencil point in a certain gear can throw off the whole machine. I mean, it's like, as long as you're getting away from paper ballots where you can actually see them and audit them and count them, and I ran for Congress 3 times, and I remembered, going and seeing them carrying in boxes of ballots after the polls had been closing. So I'm familiar with the cheating, but computer voting is the easiest to steal. And so we need to get away from that as soon as possible.
Doc, if we don't get away from them, and look, I've spent 5 years talking about this. I feel like every now and then I have to get out of the forest, out of the trees, right? Because you can't see what's going on around you. So I often say that normal people are introspective. Like, people that are good people, they always look inside and say, hey, am I missing something? Is it me? Is it, am I just trying? Is it confirmation bias that it's the machines or it's the mail-in ballots? And then I have to go back and I have to re-study the systems themselves and go, okay, it's not me. These are the vulnerabilities. This is how the systems acted. This is what's happened in the past elections. These are the Catskill records. And I have to go through this thing in my brain to make sure that I'm still not crazy. But Doc, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. There's lots of smart people, right? Why is it that we can't get to the bottom of this? Why is it that we ridicule the experts and we allow the retards, pardon my language, but that's what they are, to run the roost and tell us what the truth is when we can clearly see it with our own eyes that that's not the truth?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's tremendously frustrating. One of the things I did the last election cycle with Turning Point Faith is I spoke to pastors groups all across the country, because you have a good percentage of Christians that sit home every election and they don't get involved. And I would point out how in a republic, the citizen is the king, supposed to be anyway. In a monarchy, the king is the king, but in a republic, the citizens are the king. And so voting is just the tiniest part of your responsibility. It's like saying you're parenting. And it's like, okay, I brought home a paycheck. No, parenting is you're responsible for the whole thing. Raising the kid, putting him to bed, giving him bath, right? And so voting is just a tiny part. You're responsible for the whole thing. We need to get involved in making sure these elections are secure. We need to get involved in school board races. We need to put pressure on the politicians. And so in my talk, I would highlight that in the 1600s, you literally had churches founding cities. So Providence, Rhode Island was founded by the first Baptist church in America.
Yeah.
Hartford, Connecticut was founded by the first Congregational church in America. So everybody's involved in church and everybody's involved in city government because it's the church founding the city, right? And so it wasn't until the 1700s you had a Great Awakening revival, and people thought, okay, if you're really Christian, you won't do worldly things like bars and brothels and government. It's like, oh, okay, where did that come from? And so that you got this idea that we're holier than you are because we're not involved in government. And the irony is if all the spiritual people withdraw themselves from government, who's left to be involved but the less spiritual? It's like, duh. What are they going to do? Less spiritual stuff. They're going to be ambitious. They're going to be power hungry, and they're going to want to oppress others. And And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Don't get involved in government because it's worldly. Well, why is it worldly? Because we're not involved in government, right? All the good people have withdrawn themselves. Well, who's left to be involved?
Well, I think you're onto something. I think what you're saying is important because what you're talking about is societal. You're talking about the responsibility that we have as men and as faith-driven individuals, right? But we have the church that's been captured on one side. And by the way, I have studied what Turning Point Faith is doing, and it's fantastic. It's fantastic. And it's not at the forefront, by the way, and I think it should be, because I think that the men, fathers especially, have to have an avenue by which they can create a brotherhood, and I think that Turning Point Faith has that capability, frankly. But the communities have seen everything as politics, not as virtue, not as... We've stripped out virtue, we've stripped out ethics, we've stripped out all that, and we've reversed it and said that politics is the antithesis of virtue. And so you have to stay out of politics in order to be a good person, and the bad people are driven to it because the good people will say, I got to stay away from it.
Yeah, it's a lie, but it's very attractive. In other words, the devil's attitude is try to stop people from becoming Christian. But if they become Christian, at the very least, you can motivate them not to do anything, to withdraw, and to, in the Middle Ages, it was go into a monastery and take vows of silence so nobody will even hear from you again. And it's like, okay, if we can't prevent them from becoming a Christian, if they happen to be one, let's make them think they're holy by isolating themselves so they won't influence anybody else. And it's like, that's a pretty clever trick. And so I tell people, if you're not involved, they're teaching in the schools that God doesn't exist, and if he does exist, they give him the kids the impression that he's messed up. He's put in men and women's bodies. You have to have operation to fix it. What a messed up God! And if that behavior is not sin, what behavior? Well, sex outside of marriage, right? If that's not sin, arguably there are no sins. And if there's no sins, you don't need a savior. So they're undermining the entire gospel. So you have to admit, it's a pretty clever trick the devil's pulled to get people who believe the gospel of Christ, let their kids be taught the gospel of Antichrist. Like, who would have thought the devil could have pulled that one off? Oh, we're real spiritual. We're just going to not be involved. We're going to let ungodly government teach our kids that God doesn't exist, that he's messed up, there's no sin, there's no need for a savior.
Man, there's so much I want to say to that, and that we've allowed for, an erosion of basic morality. And at the same time, we've invited for schools to have these like Satanist clubs. And the logic of that is that if you can have one religion, you can have another. So the Satanist religion has a religion, but the roots of it are tied to evil. I mean, even their own teachings are tied to evil. And so how is it that, and maybe this is a question you can't answer or you can answer, how is it that we as a society accepted the fact, we used to stand up. We used to stand up and we would, frankly, let's go to the 1800s, we would tar and feather people that did harm to our communities. I'm not advocating for us tar and feathering anyone. What I'm saying is that now we're so apathetic and we're so disinterested and we'll just take care of our own family that we've created this selfish environment where we've allowed for evil to literally get a seat at the table.
Yeah. It is one of these things where you get frustrated that people don't see it. There's a guy named J.D. Unwin, wrote a book in 1934 called Sex and Culture, and he.
I've read that book. That's weird that you bring that up. Like, okay, keep going.
And
sorry.
So basically, civilizations have life cycles. You have a little seedling, and then it's a plant, and it grows, and it bears fruit, and then it ends up getting old and rotten, and it dies. And so a civilization, J.D. Unwin, goes through 4 stages. One is a period of pain and poverty, right? So the war, famine. In Israel's case, they were slaves for hundreds of years, and then they make it through that, and they work hard, and they get productive, and then they work together, and they get patriotic. And then they end up achieving prosperity. And then they want to enjoy the prosperity, and they get promiscuous and lazy and indulgent and sexually immoral, and they get weakened, and then they get conquered by the next rising civilization. And so J.D. Unwin even called it a sexual marketplace. He said, if women as a group say nothing happens unless there's a commitment, well, the guys make the commitment and then go out and work hard to provide for their wife. And then the next things that happen is little kids appear. And the guy gets protective of his wife and family. And when all the men of the country get productive and protective, rising water floats all boats. The country is productive, protective, creative, expansionistic, even militaristic, right? They're strong. But when the women as a group say there does not need to be a commitment, well, you're going to have a bunch of guys getting pleasure focused and selfish and lazy and irresponsible and indulgent. And there's fewer kids born, and the ones that are born don't have a dad around, and they become undisciplined. And there's fewer kids born to fill the ranks of the military. And when enough of the men act this way, the country gets weakened, and again, they get conquered by the next rising civilization. And so J.D. Unwin said it's irreversible. Once a country gets into sexual promiscuity, the flesh wants the pleasure. And once you've taken off the restraints, it's really hard to bring the restraints back. It's like a dam that breaks. It's really hard to put the dam back and put the water behind there again. So we're facing an uphill challenge. But I do get encouragement from the Bible, because you'll often see there's stories where things look really, really bad, and then God raises up little nobodies with faith and courage, and they bring a revival, and then people end up, whether it's a Gideon, a David, or a Samson or Jephthah, but you have people raised up to push back against the evil, and then God gives them another generation, and then it's up to the next generation to do the same thing.
What's interesting about that book, by the way, is that you cannot find it published anywhere. You cannot buy it anywhere. I did put it inside the comments for you guys. You can read it. I put the PDF version. I actually had the PDF version on my computer. I had just read this book when you brought it up. And I think you actually mentioned it in your book. Didn't you mention it in your book?
Yeah, in book on socialism, I mentioned J.D. Unwin.
Yeah. So, and I'm not all the way through it, by the way. I am reading it, but and everyone else should read it because it's a fascinating book, and it actually talks. I read everything. Like, I can't stop reading, and so every day when I have extra time at night, especially when my mind keeps working, I just keep reading. But that was a book that I read, and I had no hope by the time I was done reading it. Just so you know.
Yeah. I mean, even John Adams wrote to Thomas Jefferson, like in 1817. He said, "Have you ever seen a single instance in history where a nation given over to sinfulness has ever returned to virtue? Can you explain to me, have you ever seen ones that have given over to effeminacy that have ever returned to morality?" And then he says that no effort in favor of virtue is lost. But he mentions effeminacy. And so he said luxury produces effeminacy, that when you have this prosperity, and then you want to enjoy it, and there's no limit to the human lust, right? You'll eat chocolate all day long if you don't have discipline, but you'll also have sexual immorality, and so we're in this place where we need to have a revival and a reformation. And again, outside the Bible, it's discouraging, but when you look at it, it's like, okay, the Lord always seems to wait until things look hopeless, and then he raises up, a little Gideon against 100,000 Midianites. Gideon's 300.
Gideon 300, yeah. The judges. So let me ask you a question. If we look at you have another book that I got a chance to read, which is about, I think it's America's God. Was it America's God and Country?
Yeah.
And it talks about the foundations of the United States being firm in their Judeo-Christian roots. I'm not so sure I believe in the Judeo-Christian roots. I think it's Christian roots, but I can be convinced. But even with that, you have this secularism that's been now justified, all these actions towards how we treat people, and you can see this erosion of just justice. You call it justice that we have inside of our country. So how do we get back? How do we get back to what do you think that the footprint or the map looks like to get back to that? Is there something like here are the 5 things that we could do as a community. Here are the disciplines that we can create?
Well, first, we need to discover what it is we lost. In other words, if you're looking around for something that's lost, and it's like, what are you looking for? Well, I don't know. I'm just sort of looking around for. No, you have to know what you lost. And so, in my different books, I go through all the world's history, from the beginning of the invention of writing, Sumerian cuneiform on clay tablets in the Mesopotamian Valley, created around 3300 BC. That's when writing was invented. You can even Google on your phone, when was writing created, and it'll pull up 32 to 3400 BC. And so from the beginning of the invention of writing till now, the most common form of government is what? It's gangs, and a gang leader with enough weapons we call a king, or a pharaoh, or a Caesar, Kaiser, Sultan, Czar. Power wants to concentrate in the hands of one person. It's a hierarchical system. If you're friends with the king, you're more equal. If you're not friends with the king, you're less equal. If you're an enemy of the king, you're dead. It's called treason, or you're a slave. And as the centuries go on, with the latest military advancements, the kings can conquer larger areas. And with technological advancements, the kings can track more people. So Augustus Caesar wanted a worldwide tracking system called the census, a tax enrollment. He wanted to count everybody under his control. If he could have had access to 5G and cell phones and facial recognition software, I bet he'd been tempted to use that.
He loved it.
And then the weapons improved. You go from Cain killing Abel with a rock to killing with a bronze weapon, or an iron weapon, or a big long phalanx spear the Greeks had, or a scimitar sword the Muslims had, or gunpowder. The weapon keeps improving, so the kings conquer larger areas, but it's that same fallen nature of Cain killing Abel. Until finally the King of England had the biggest. The sun never set on the British Empire. He was a globalist. He had India, a quarter of the world's population right there, Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, British Guyana, Canada, Barbados, Bermuda, Jamaica, and America. And so America's founders broke away from the king and flipped it and made the people the king. So America is an experiment of a polarity change in the flow of power. Instead of top down, it's bottom up. Where did the founders get their idea? From the New England pastors. Where did they get their idea? The Reformation, from the Bible. What part of the Bible? That first 400 years out of Egypt before Israel got a king. Yes. Lo and behold, from 1400 BC to 1000 BC, when Israel comes out of Egypt, you have an anomaly. Instead of a king, you have millions of people and no king. And it worked because every citizen was taught the law and personally accountable to God to follow it. So you have an opportunity to steal. There's no police. There's no king. Nobody's watching. And then you think God's watching. He wants me to be fair. He's going to hold me accountable in the future. Maybe I should hesitate stealing. And it creates a tiny thing in your head called the conscience. Yeah. If everybody in the country believes this, you can maintain order with no police. And it worked for 400 years in Israel until the priests went woke. Right? They went rainbow church. I mean, here's Eli, the high priest. His own sons are sleeping with women in the very tent where the Ark of the Covenant is. Right? Sexual immorality, like J.D. Unwin talked about. You got a Levite with a concubine when the law says the Levite's to marry a virgin of his own tribe. And you got sodomites raping the concubine to death. And it says every man does what's right in their own eyes. Why? Because the priest stopped teaching them what was right in the Lord's eyes. And they all go to Samuel the prophet and they say, we want to be like the other countries. We want a king. And they get King Saul. Why is this story important? The kings of Europe look to the Bible for their authority, but they look to the King Saul and after. And the Pilgrims and Puritans that founded New England looked to the before King Saul period, right? The Hebrew Republic. And so they taught Hebrew at Yale and Harvard. So to be more accurate, it would be a Hebrew Republic hyphen Christianity. Matter of fact, the Puritans were nicknamed Christian Hebraists. Yeah. Because they were studying this Hebrew Republic so much. And so that
literally was able to survive itself with a community temperament. In other words, the community is what tempered and created the system of justice, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, in this 400-year period before they got a king, each town would elect their own elders. And so it wasn't some king sending a captain to the town with soldiers and forcing some rule top down. No, it's everybody in the town. It says, the people that hate covetousness and you can't bribe them. And you would choose them to be the elders of your city. And so it worked. and so there's a dozen different things unique about this Hebrew Republic. Number one, it was the first time in world history where there was private land ownership. Because wherever there's a king, you never really own the land. It's always conditional, you staying on the nice side of the king. If you cross the king, he will take away your land and kill you. But in Israel, the land was permanently titled to each family. If they got in a pinch and sold it, every 50 years it reverted back to that family. And so Israel is the beginning of private land ownership. Now, if you own land, you can accumulate stuff. The Bible called that being blessed. Karl Marx called it being a capitalist. But it's stuff, it's your stuff. And now you're in a position to be charitable. You can give away some of your stuff. Well, in communism, you don't own anything. Karl Marx, in his Communist Manifesto, said the theory of communism is summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property. If you don't own anything, how can you be charitable? How can you give away what you don't have? What, are you going to steal and break the law? Now you're a thief? No, God entrusts you with stuff and then gives you opportunities to show on the outside the love of God that's on the inside. So here, ancient Israel, there's 400 years, they had private land ownership, and they could read. So we talked about cuneiform and the invention of writing. In Sumeria, they had 1,500 cuneiform characters. It started as an accounting method. Right, the first invention was the plow. Cain was the tiller of the soil. Then they start hitting each other with it. They turn into weapons. But when you grow stuff, they would want to count it. And so, like tally 1, 2, 3, 4 with lines, and then to draw a line across for 5. These little markings, and so that turned into writing. But there was 1,500 cuneiform characters. Imagine teaching those to children. That'd be pretty complicated. And then in Egypt, they had 3,000 hieroglyphic characters. Matter of fact, the scribes kept them complicated on purpose as job security. So they were needed as a class to interpret. Only 1% of Egypt could read. 2600 BC, the Yellow Emperor in China invented their characters, and they had 10,000 Chinese characters, but only for court records. When Moses comes down the mountain, he has the law in a 22-character alphabet. First letter's Aleph, second letter Beth. Sound familiar? It's so easy to learn. Kids could learn it. Israel was the first literate population on planet Earth. So ancient Israel, not only could they own land, everybody can read, and not only does everybody read the law, everybody helps enforce the law. So the verse everyone has memorized is Leviticus 19:18, love your neighbor as yourself. The verse immediately before it says, confront your neighbor directly so you will not be held guilty for their sin. Right? So they're the ones that are sinning, but you have to confront them. And so it's like a parent. You love your kid, but every now and then you got to confront your kid. It's like in Israel, you love your neighbor. Every now and then you got to confront your neighbor because there's no police to call. There's no king. And then ancient Israel, not only did everybody help enforce the law, there's no police. And then there's no standing army. There's no king with a standing. Every man's in the militia, armed with a sword upon their thigh, ready at a moment's notice to defend his family and his community. Ancient Israel had a bureaucracy-free welfare system. What's that? Well, in Egypt, if you need food, the government will give you food, but it's in exchange for your cattle, your land, your lives. But in ancient Israel, you need food. Well, everybody leaves the gleanings, the corners of their field for the poor people to pick through, like Ruth. So the poor were taken care of in a decentralized manner. And then the big one is that ancient Israel, they got to choose their own leaders of their different towns. Moses said, how can I alone bear your burden? Take you, wise men, and understanding and known among your tribes, and I'll make them rulers over you. All right, so you know the people that are honest, and you can't bribe them no matter what. So Israel was a bottom-up form of government. It worked because everybody's taught the law and accountable to God, and it worked until the priests went woke, and then they said there's no more sin, do whatever you want. And Eli, his own sons are sleeping with women in the tent of meeting where the Ark of the Covenant is, and anyway, it turns into chaos, and they get King Saul.
I had a question related to how do we solve it? How do we get back there? But I do want to say this. This gives me hope. When I was younger, when I was in my 20s, I was not a very virtuous person at all. I was the opposite of that. I mean, I was not faithful. I was partying like a rock star. Everything that you'd think would be important. My children were very important to me, so I always had time for them, but I almost lived two lives. One where I was, taking care of my children, and one where I just ran out and just did whatever I wanted, right? Slept with women, did anything I wanted. So fast forward, you got to the point in my 30s where God just took a hold of me and it's like, hey, look, this is the reason why I gave you these talents is to do good with them, and you're using them for bad. Like, you're using all of that to self-gratify yourself. And he almost like grabbed me and said, listen, I need you to go a different direction. This is after I paid for an abortion, which I'm not proud of, right? It haunts me to this day because it wasn't convenient. And, saying this on the show, which is kind of, I try to stay as transparent as possible. But then I got into my 30s, early 30s, had this kind of revolutionary change in who I was as a person, 32 to be exact. And then I go forward from there, and I've lived the last 18 years, I think, a pretty virtuous life. I mean, based on that principle, like just say that I'm like normal. And I hope I am. I hope the 20s, I mean, who is it that sends their kids out at 18 and so they can go do whatever they want, sow their oats, and then come back? Is that the Amish?
Yeah.
So can we get to this place? Do we have to bring young people to that place faster? I mean, how do we fix this? 'Cause I know historically it hasn't fared well, but I also know of my own devices, I was able to make some significant changes in my life based on my connection with God.
Yeah, I think that's where Charlie Kirk was brilliant, because he was saying, look, stop watching pornography, go out and date a girl, get married, be responsible, have kids, go to church, and save your country. And in other words, we don't have to waste a decade trying to find out who we are. There's a verse in the Bible that says, remember thy creator in the days of thy youth. And so Charlie has sparked a movement that has been motivating young men and now with young women back to church. I think the devil hates that. The left hates that. They've tried to diffuse that. But I do think that there is a movement that has started that is not going to stop.
But they killed the great. They killed the great debater. They killed the person that. They didn't kill Charlie because of what he was saying. They killed Charlie because the young people were listening.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's my biggest fear, is that there's not enough men that are taking the place of Charlie. And look, I didn't agree with Charlie a lot. Right. There's some things I just didn't agree with him. Andy was from Nevada, was there at a pastors conference, and he asked Charlie about elections because most people know what it was, and that was the hot potato that Charlie was told to stay away from. Like, don't talk about election machines, don't talk about it. It makes people uncomfortable. Uh-oh. Did we lose?
I can still hear you.
Okay.
I can still hear. It must be my internet connection.
But he asked Charlie a question, and Charlie's like, basically said to Andy, well, you're a Fed, okay, but you're a Fed, which is preposterous. I mean, Andy's the furthest thing from a Fed. But there's this frustration that boiled over in being able to talk about certain things and not talk about other things. And then all of a sudden, Charlie was starting to talk about the things that were forbidden to talk about. And so I look at it and go, okay, Charlie's now talking about, he call it grow a conscience. He was talking about things, and then all of a sudden he gets killed. And so I look at this and go, how are we going to replace Charlie? How are we going to replace the conversation with young people? How are we going to convince young people that they just need to do their own research? And I am deathly afraid of the fact that we have capitulated as older generation. We keep wanting to drive to and give to young people what they want. Like I want to text. They'll say, young people say, I don't like to talk on the phone, I want to text. Well, people over the age of 40 don't like to text at all. They like to have phone conversation. If these young people get out of high school and they come work for you, which we have a couple, and then they tell us, and I know this doesn't seem relevant, but it is, that instead of like with your children, you want to tell your children to do things, and you know that it's not going to make them feel good, but you do it anyway, right? Because you know it's better for them. And now we're letting young people kind of do silly things like change their genders and get litter boxes and become furries and do all this craziness, and we're not doing anything about it. Well, Charlie was questioning that. And now it's a void. Nobody's questioning it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tremendous void. And I think that we have our work cut out for us. There was a rush to co-opt his audience. And unfortunately, I think some of that audience has been taken by someone who is maybe unwittingly, but definitely being used by what I would call the feds, the deep state, to sow division. Why? Because I've studied Cold War tactics. I've studied color revolutions.
And who is that person, by the way? Can you name him?
Well, I mean, it's just some big podcasters that are blaming Turning Point and the Charlie's dearest friends for being a part of the problem, and it's like that's divisive, right? You know, the name devil means to divide, and so there can only be one will in heaven. It's God's will. It's a good will. But there can only be one will in heaven. And 5 times in the book of Isaiah, Satan says, I will be like the Most High. I will put my throne above the throne of the Lord. I will be the mountains of the north and all this. And so we got 2 wills going on. And they're not the same. So there's not unity. There's conflict. There's war in heaven. And so Satan's cast out. And so he goes into the garden and he gets Adam to blame Eve. And he gets them to choose their will over God's will. And then he sows this division. One interesting story, we mentioned Gideon. He had a bunch of sons and they ruled Israel. Well, he had an illegitimate son named Abimelech. And he wanted power. So he goes to the town of Shechem and he says, is it better for you that the sons of Gideon reign over you? Remember also that I am your flesh and your bone. He's doing race politics. He's doing identity politics. And so he gets these people say, well, we got to vote for Abimelech because he is our brother. And so he gets this following together and he goes to the house of Ophrah and he kills all the other Gideon's sons and he makes himself a king. And then, luckily, after a couple of years, a lady throws a millstone over the wall and it kills Abimelech. But here you have a nation that is at peace. It just defeated 100,000 Midianites. There are no external enemies, and you have this guy doing this race politics, dividing it to seize power. So and then you go fast forward to there was a Indian Machiavelli, probably about 500 BC, named Chanakya, but India had hundreds of kingdoms. And during the Maurya Empire, and he gave this advice to send in spies and to stir up division within the kingdoms. And then once they weakened themselves, then they could be conquered. And so the Maurya Empire under Chandragupta builds this enormous empire, but it started with him causing divisions. Ironically enough, the British did the exact same thing in 1714. The British built a trading post in Bengal that turns into a trading fort, which turned into them having guns. And then they would give guns to some allies, but then they would give guns to other ones because even though they weren't their allies, they didn't want them getting guns from the Dutch. And so they were giving guns to both sides. And then they would allow them to fight each other and bloody and weaken each other. And then the British could conquer both of the
really familiar.
And so then the British did the same thing in America during the Revolution. The General Johnny Burgoyne in Canada comes down and he meets with the Mohawk Indians and he promises them money for scalps. So here the Indians and the Americans had reached an equilibrium. They were getting along, but the British stir up the Indians and it got so bad, these scalpings, that it's listed as one of the 27 reasons in the Declaration of why we were rebelling. The king has excited domestic insurrection among us and has got the merciless savages of the frontiers to butcher the inhabitants of our settlements. But it's this exciting domestic insurrection among us. And then we look at Machiavelli. So 500 years ago, Italy was a bunch of city-states. Venice, Genoa, Naples, Florence, Siena, and they had armies and fought. And Machiavelli thought if one prince could control all of Italy, it would stop the infighting. So he writes a book called The Prince, where he advocates the ends justifies the means. The end of one prince controlling all of Italy is such a good end, because it'll stop the infighting, that any means necessary to get there is justified. So if a prince conquers a city, the people would hate him. But if the prince pays criminals to create riots and smash windows and set buildings on fire, the people will cry out for help, and the prince will come in, get rid of the very criminals he paid to create the crises. Nobody would know the better for it, and everyone would praise the prince as a hero. So it's called Machiavellianism, where you create or capitalize on a crisis to consolidate control. Then you fast forward to the early 1800s, and you have Germany is a bunch of kingdoms. Bavaria, Saxony, Prussia, and they have armies and fight. And Napoleon had conquered them. And so the king of Prussia is Frederick, and he gets his professor at the University of Berlin named Hegel. And Hegel says, okay, we need to strengthen the state so we can't be conquered again like by a Napoleon. And so he takes all of what I just explained and put it into a nice, neat triangle called dialectics. So it's one corner of the triangle is the thesis, the opposite corner is the antithesis or antithesis, and the top corner is a synthesis. It sounds complicated, but it's not. So Karl Marx would say the thesis is the status quo. It's the way things have been for a long time. You have to create an antithesis. In other words, you create a problem that's really bad, and everybody panics in fear, and they're willing to surrender some of their freedom to settle for an answer that's just half as bad. Then that becomes
which is what we're going through right now.
Yeah. And then that becomes the new starting point thesis. You create another problem that's real bad, and everybody gives up some more of their freedom to settle for an answer that's half as bad. And that becomes the new starting point. You create another problem that's real bad. And Mao Zedong called it a continuous revolution. And so you see these tactics that, again, we, with our CIA, have used them overseas to keep countries from falling into the Soviet orbit. But Obama turned all these tactics inward for political reasons on the American population.
You know, the more I talk to you, the more I look at the history and I look at how we can educate people very simply. And I think that's really the key is how do we educate people on the left and the right? And I want to use the diabolical opposition to how people seem to stand on both sides. Frankly, I think a vast majority of people stand right in the middle and aren't paying attention to what the left and the right are doing, but they're the unintended victims that get the crossfire, right? They're the ones that have to choose. Am I standing over here or am I standing over here, right? It's a very uncomfortable place to be for most people because, again, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. If you want to know what most people want, they literally want to be able to take care of their families. They want to be able to have them thrive, have opportunity. They really don't have any interest in this political banter that happens on an ongoing basis, and they don't trust either side of it. They don't trust what anyone's saying, right? So
yeah,
go ahead.
Well, it's just like, how do you destroy a marriage? Sow division. Yeah. How do you destroy a church? Sow division. How do you destroy a country? Sow division. How do you destroy a conservative movement? Sow division. Get it to fight. It's
how do you destroy a company? I mean, it's the whole idea of it is to sow division. It's a cancer. It's a boat anchor.
Yeah, it's injecting an autoimmune disease into the body politic. What's an autoimmune disease? It's where your own immune system starts attacking your own organs and joints. You got a war, you got inflammation, you got fire, you got a war going on inside of your body's fighting itself, right? And so you inject this autoimmune disease into a body politic, into a country. Patriotism is the enemy. You get people to identify in subgroups, right? All this intersectionality stuff, or in the conservative movement, the pro-Israel, anti-Israel, or what's happening with the attacks on Turning Point. You want to take the strongest motivating young person movement to energize the country prior to the midterms and get it to fight itself.
And it is working. Dr. Federer, it's working.
Yeah.
I mean, let me tell you a story. I have a friend of mine. He's very, 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 very wealthy. And he just got back. He went to a Turning Point USA event that just happened at the Mar-a-Lago, right? And he made a donation for $100,000. He took it. He has a nonprofit that he donates money out of. And when Charlie died, he gave him $100,000. A week ago, he called me. 2 weeks ago, he called me. And he said, Joe, I gave him $100,000. I kind of want my money back. I keep hearing all the things that are happening about Turning Point, and I don't want to support it. And I thought about it, and I go, well, then just ask him for your money back. And he goes, and I thought about it later, and I went back, and I was like, listen, you have got to lay all, what you said, you have to lay all this stuff to the side. Now, I was just trying to placate him with like, whatever, do what you want to do, support it or not support it. But because of the infighting that's happening inside of Turning Point, Charlie, they had to knock off the general, and they did. Then they had to create a story and a foundational story, which is what you're talking about, Candace Owens. And I know Tucker Carlson just came out today and talked a little bit about what Candace Owens has been saying, and that there are people inside of his own circle that betrayed him. I actually don't even care that that's true or not. What I care about is that the engine of what Charlie represented is now being gutted.
Yeah, it's that you attack the victim. So in Islam, for example, they rape a woman, and then they say that it's the woman's fault because she allowed herself to be used as a tool of Satan to tempt the man. So what do? They whip the woman 100 times. And so this idea is you attack, October 7th, Israel is attacked. And when you have this big emotional event, it's like liquid cement. It can be steered. And so they want to quickly co-opt the story to blame Israel for Israel being attacked. But that's the way Islam is. Islam attacks. Muhammad was in Mecca, and he becomes confrontational, and he's disturbing the peace. And so they chase him out of town. And so Muhammad claims that he was the victim, and he robs the caravans headed back to Mecca. And he says, well, you were intolerant of me, and therefore I'm justified in attacking you. But it's this idea, it's called projection. And little kids do it automatically. I didn't start the fight, you did. Or a cheating spouse will accuse the faithful spouse of being unfaithful. In the Bible, Potiphar's wife accused Joseph of lusting after her when she was lusting after him. And it's in a 1960 military manual that they say that, the Soviets would accuse other countries of doing what they're doing. And so you do an assault against somebody, and then you blame the somebody for the assault that was done against them. So they did an attack on Turning Point, and now they're wanting to blame Turning Point for the very attack that was upon a Turning Point. It's a classic psychological classic color revolution tactic.
But it's working.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, let's be honest. And I think that's one of the things that they have to, and it doesn't help. And I'm just going to say this. It doesn't help when Erica Kirk gets on TV and talks about the fact that people are wrong or attack a certain group of people that believe a certain thing, because the government actually created this vacuum, Doc. They created this vacuum.
Yeah, my feeling is it is a deep state psyop attack
100%.
On Turning Point because it was on track to win the midterms, to mobilizing unbelievable amount of young people. And so they're attacking. Erica Kirk is a victim of this.
100%.
I mean, she's like I don't know how old she is, but she's, in her 20s or whatever, but she's a mother of two children. And here she is thrust out there, and now they're wanting to blame her. It has all the markings of a psyops. I ran for Congress 3 times. I ran against Dick Gebhardt. He was the House Minority Leader. He was the Hakeem Jeffries back 20 years ago. He was the #1 Democrat in Congress. It was a big race. We had top 3 members of the U.S. Congress come in and campaign for me. Back then, it was Dennis Hastert, Dick Armey, and J.C. Watts. We had the president's uncle, co-chair of my finance committee, Bucky Bush. We had Ted Nugent during commercials, Chuck Norris, Pat Boone, Art Linkletter, Zig Ziegler, Alan Keyes, Judge Roy Moore, Phyllis Schlafly, James Thompson. And it was the most expensive congressional race in Missouri history. But I was the victim of these attacks that were upon me. Gebhardt wrote a book, and he called it the Politics of Personal Destruction. You don't just want to defeat somebody, you want to destroy them so that they could never run again. And so this was 20, 25 years ago that these tactics were being used, and they've perfected them. And now with the media, they can magnify them. And I mean, to show how powerful it is, there are instances now where a kid, they call it sextorting, but a kid comes home from football practice and looks at his phone, and they're putting, AI generated pictures or something on there, and they can so get into his head that the kid ends up committing suicide within a couple hours of this. There's other ones where the Chat GPT becomes the friend of this kid, and says, I'll see you on the other side, and put the metal against your, and coaches them through committing suicide. And the parents are going back afterwards, reading the threads. And so the power they have to make boys think they're girls, the power they have to get the whole world to inject itself with something, even though nobody knows what's in it. The psyops is extremely powerful. And now with AI, they can custom design it just for you. University of Zurich did a study on Reddit users and created a profile on each user. They found out that bots were 6 times more effective at getting people to change their opinions than humans are. They know when you're scrolling through videos and you slow down, it knows that you're interested. It immediately goes out, gathers more of that content, and it's right there in your feed immediately. And so the power they have, it says in the last days there'll be strong delusion so that they'll believe a lie. And it says it'll be so bad that it'll deceive even the elect if it were possible. And that's sort of what we're coming against. And so again, if they can convince a generation of young people that boys can be girls, they're confident. They think they can do anything. I mean, I think that they're preparing, anyway, I won't get into it. But
you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
So unless you know the real Bible, you'll be deceived. And so how do I know that you're you? How do I know that you're not an AI computer-aided image? Because it's going to get to the place where
20 minutes of my banter, and you'll know exactly that I'm not.
Yeah. So it's the content. So it's not your face or your image. It's not your voice. It's the content. And so if I know your content and they create something, I can compare that with past content and say, wait a second, it doesn't line up. This doesn't line up with what Joe said in the past. People that don't know the Bible, when this deception will be so great, it'll be believable. But 100%. If you know the Bible, say, wait just a second, what I'm being told here just doesn't line up with what the Bible says in the past. I mean, Muhammad was illiterate. He could never read and write. And this angel appears to him in a cave and tells him a bunch of stuff. Well, do you know how Muhammad tested the spirit that appeared to him? He told his wife he thought he was demon possessed. His wife, you can, Google it. Khadijah had him sit on her right thigh and remove some of her veils and said, can you see the spirit? He goes, yeah, it's over there. And so she had him sit on her left thigh. She removed some more of her veils and robes. Can you still see the spirit? Yeah, over there. And then she put his head under her shift, whatever that meant, and said, can you see the spirit? He goes, no. And she said, well, it must have been from God because it was embarrassed to look upon me without all my veils and robes on. It's like, that was the test? Yeah, I mean, Muhammad didn't know the word. He didn't know where it says every spirit that does not acknowledge Christ is of Antichrist, right? And so the deception is real, but the only way to know it is to know enough of the Bible that if something is told to you, you can say, wait a second, the content doesn't line up with what it was said in the past.
Doug, I feel like we're getting a history lesson. It's actually very helpful. And I'm not sure that I cleared up all the answers I need as far as what we need to do next. If I go to Revelations, I'm in trouble because it just means we can't help but go down the path that we don't need to go down. I just feel like it's not over yet. I don't know why I feel that way. Can't put my finger on it. I just feel like we're destined to change the course of history and stop this evil from taking over the world. And
I think you're hitting it right on the head. Yeah, I tell people, God knows the future, but in a sense, He knows all the possible futures.
Yes.
And He tells you what they are. And he even tells you how to choose, right? Deuteronomy 28. If you hearken to the voice of the Lord, this will be your future. You'll be blessed coming in, blessed coming out, heading out the tail. If you do not hearken to the voice of the Lord, this will be your future. The diseases of Egypt will come upon you. The stranger will come in amongst you and rise up above you, and they'll be the head and you'll be the tail, right? The prophet Jeremiah goes to King Zedekiah and said, if you surrender to the king of Babylon, this will be your future. Jerusalem will be spared. If you don't surrender to the king of Babylon, this will be your future. Jerusalem will be burnt to the ground. Right, and so God knows the future. He tells us what the choices are. He tells us what the future paths are. He lets us choose. He even tells us how to choose. Right, choose life, and He's smart enough to know how you're going to choose. And if you want to take it another step, He's smart enough to know how He's going to respond to how you're going to choose, and He's smart enough to know how you're going to respond to how He responds to how you're. So before the children of Israel even get into the promised land, God said, I know they're going to be exposed to the pagan gods, and I know they're going to choose to follow those pagan gods, and I know I'm going to get mad at them and angry, and I know I'm going to drive them out of the land, and I know in captivity they're going to repent, and I know I'm going to end up having mercy on them and bring them back to the land. He tells them all that before they even go in. But just because God knows how you're going to choose does not take away the fact that you still have to do the choosing.
Yeah,
you still have to do the choosing. Because if God were to judge somebody before they chose to do something wrong, He would be an unjust God for judging somebody who hadn't done anything wrong yet. So even though He knows, we still have to do the choosing. Right?
So I'm going to let you go on this. I think that you've put a lot of things together. Matter of fact, I'll just read a couple of the comments. He ties a bunch together. I've known and heard much of this, but hearing it all together is good. Already sharing it to my social media. That was from Danster. And people are asking me to ask you questions. I'll ask you those questions privately, but I think we forget about history, and we forget about the significance of history as we kind of plow forward into the future. And just to kind of, I'll give you the last bit here for us. But when you look at what's happening with Turning Point, when you look at what's happening in our country, look at what's happening with our elected leadership, are you discouraged? Are you encouraged? Are you praying that God would maybe stick a hot iron into some people's backs? I mean, what are we dealing with, Doctor? Where are we up against?
Yeah, there's always hope. There's always hope, and so
it's not a strategy though.
Yeah, from my point of view, I think God is pushing the world to a decision-making moment. The Bible says we're the bride of Christ. Well, a bride, I mean, every romance novel builds up to what? A decision-making moment, a forsaking of all others and choosing the one.
Right.
And so I think God is saying, okay, we're getting closer to the end. I don't know. I sort of view it like a GPS on your phone. If we repent, we can take the long route to the book of Revelation. If we don't repent, we can take the direct route. We're going to get there, right? But it's this idea that we're the bride of Christ, and so He won't force us. It's like we're not robots, and so He's like, but we're getting closer to the end, and He wants to hurry this decision-making process up. So He's exposing the evil, right? He's exposing, people being on fire for Jesus. I mean, Charlie talked about Jesus. I was at his memorial service, and it was amazing to hear Hegseth and Rubio and Vance all talking about Jesus. It's never happened before in my life to have that. But at the same time, you're seeing the curtain pull back and more violent and more evil. And I think God's like saying, okay, I need you to hurry up and make your decision. So I'm not going to force you because you're a free will being, but I'm going to make the choices really clear. God, devil, choose. And so when you view it from the fact that God's allowing all this to see how we're going to respond, hey, if we get through this problem, there'll be another one. We get through that
100%.
problem, there'll be another one. There's always, it's the human condition. So why does God allow these problems? To get us to react. And if we're not going to play a good offense, at least let's play a good defense. If the body of Christ is not taken serious, winning the world for Christ, at least don't keep your mouth shut when they want to mutilate a little kid.
100%.
Right?
100%.
And so this is so my attitude is that it's how we respond. It's us getting involved, saying, "Here I am, Lord, use me." Whether it's going to turn around or not, I'm believing that it is going to turn around. But whether it does or not, I am going to put myself out there to be known for standing out in faith and wanting to do the Lord's will. And it always takes courage. The first ones thrown in the lake of fire are the ones that are cowards. So Charlie was an example of courage. And I think that this is the time for it. And every generation has a crisis. Attila the Hun had an army of 500,000 men wiping out cities across Europe. Genghis Khan kills 30 million people from Korea to hunger. The Spanish flu kills millions. And, the bubonic plague. There's always a crisis. Why does God allow crises? To force us to show whose side we're on. To force us to say, well, I believe in my heart. It's like, yeah, if you love a girl and you never say anything to her and never do anything to show her that you love her, do you really love her? If you just, there's that girl over there, I love her. Do you ever say anything? Did you ever do anything to show her? No. She's getting beat up in the parking lot. Or you're looking out the window and watching her get beat. No, if you love her, you're going to go out there and defend her, right? And so it's one thing, I love God. It's like, yeah, God knew that Abraham, knew Abraham's heart, but he still wanted to see Abraham be willing to take Isaac to the top of Mount Moriah and be willing to sacrifice him. God wants to, people say, God knows my heart. It was, yeah. But he wants to hear some words out of your mouth, and he wants to see some actions if you really believe. So whatever the crisis is, in my estimation, the purpose of the crisis is to force us to have to respond and show whose side we're in. And you're doing that, Joe, in a tremendous way. And that's why I really appreciate your stand and your honesty and your transparency and your right on your opinions. I'm very, very impressed with you. And I just consider it an honor to be on your show.
It's an honor to have you on. Thank you. How do people follow you?
AmericanMinute.com, and then I do some of the Instagram, and my son does our social media stuff at YouTube. But and I'd be thrilled to be on your show again anytime.
I would love to have you back on again. So thank you, Dr. Federer. I appreciate you being on. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. Thank you for the education that you're giving people, especially on this show. And thank you for the tireless efforts to go around the nation and to speak at Turning Point USA events, and maybe to calm a little bit of the waters that are causing some of this co-opting to happen of what I can only consider one of the most powerful movements ever to happen in my lifetime.
Yeah. I texted Lucas Miles yesterday and says, we need to get an army of praying grandmothers for Turning Point in this movement, because this is a spiritual attack. And
I agree.
And so whether it gets organized or not, I want to ask the listening audience and viewing to not just read the news, but pray for Turning Point, because it is a powerful tool that has the potential to save the country and motivate people for the midterms.
I agree. Dr. Federer, thank you. God bless you.
Thank you.
He's probably one of my favorite visitors, and I say that about certain visitors that come on, but Dr. Federer is a walking encyclopedia of knowledge, and I find it interesting that I was reading the book. I literally was reading the Sex and Culture book. I believe that I got it from his book when I started just perusing through his original book about socialism. But I wanted to I just looked it up, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So then I went on the scouring event and found it in PDF. So I did put it in the comments if you want to read it. It's a really good book. And then read Dr. Federer's book on socialism as well. I think that's super interesting. That leads me down a path of just other things that I talk about quite often. And as I talk about Tina Peters and the government and kind of the apparatuses that we come up again, I did ask the question, like, who are the antagonists? Who are the influencers that are maybe taking shots at Turning Point? And look, I I've said it before, I don't always agree with what Turning Point does. I didn't always agree with what Charlie said, but I always agree with what Charlie did, right? So he would say things, or he would, there are things that he just wasn't going to talk about, that he wasn't going to support. And it's not that he didn't have an opinion of it. He was just very quiet about the fact that if he had an opinion and someone said, well, I told Joe that this, or I told Mike that this, and it's absolutely the machines, it would cause a problem, and the fact that it would cause a conflict, then we'd have to have an opinion on it. So he was very tight-lipped about certain things, and not things that I agreed with either. But the other side of this thing is that we just talked about a void. We have a void in what we deal with collectively as well, like you and I. Like, we have a void that got created by faith. And you know that there's a void because there are many people that don't consider Mormons Christians, yet the Mormon church worships Jesus. So they're like, well, but they had this prophet, his name was Joseph Smith, and so I say, well, who are you to say that he wasn't a prophet? And the God that would use prophets, if God has used prophets through the last 4,000, 5,000 years, he has. I mean, it's like, so now we get to decide who's the prophet and who isn't the prophet. And remember, they didn't believe that Jesus was the Savior, that he was the Messiah. They killed him. And yet today, 2,000 years later, we're like, well, Jesus died on the cross. And 3 days later, he rose from the dead. But imagine if Jesus came back today. Would we actually even notice that Jesus was here? Would we even accept that? Or would we flog him and do the same thing that we did 2,000 years ago? Well, the human condition is that we're being conditioned in a secular environment to forget about Jesus altogether and to believe that it's a fairy tale. And they use bots and they use all of this information in the social media environment to drive away to the one singular thing that I know absolutely that is true, and that is the devil is trying to convince every one of you that he does not exist. And he's doing it through the lens of saying that Jesus doesn't exist, that God doesn't exist, that everything you do in life doesn't matter. And that is allowed for the slippery slope of people not having any sort of moral aptitude. They're not held to any standard. It doesn't matter if you put your hand on a Bible, because you can violate that oath of office by just justifying your position, that a means justifies the end, no matter what it does. And if it isn't true, then why is it that rape on the streets of Britain, let's say, are 25, 30, 40,000 people a year? Or a young child that's 12 years old comes out with a knife and a hatchet to fend off a rape gang member, and she is the one that is charged. She is the one that is punished. See, we're in an upside down world, yet we wouldn't see it, we wouldn't recognize it if it was right side up. We don't know if what they're saying about Charlie Kirk is true or untrue. We just know that the whole idea of this vacuum that was created by Charlie Kirk dying left a void that has been filled up with something that can only be described as not good. And the people that were friends with Charlie Kirk turned so quickly on the idea that it was conspiracy and that other people in his circle are somehow responsible for his death. But were they? I know a few things to be true. I know he wasn't shot with a .30-06. I find it very, very peculiar that there's this lone gunman in all of these different environments. You have a 20-year-old that climbed up on the roof in one of the walk past Secret Service, walk past this. I'm talking about President Trump being shot at. And then if we lay that aside and we just talk about the guy that Ryan Ruth or whatever his name is that was hanging out in the bushes in Mar-a-Lago, and President Trump wasn't even scheduled to go out on the golf course but ended up going out, well, how did he know? And you say, oh, it's just a coincidence. And we talk about the stories of what the FBI has done in the J6 pipe bomber. We could discuss that, which happened yesterday we were talking to Kyle Seraphin. And the information that we were able to tell you definitively that this is true, that you have suspect number 3 and you have suspect number 2 or undisclosed party number 1, 2, undisclosed party number 3. You have the person that lives next door that happens to work for Capitol Hill Police that was firing on protesters on J6, who then went to work for the CIA, has absolutely no footprint. And you can talk about the coincidences and all that, and the fact that they arrested Brian and said, okay, this is the guy that actually did the pipe bomb, and it happened to come on the edge of a story by Steve Baker. See, everything is a convenient truth, and yet the government hasn't told us the truth about anything because it does not favor the people. And so when I sat here and talked to Dr. Federer, the one thing that I got from what he was saying is that we have to pay very close attention to the systems and the rules and the games that they play, which historically have been going on for thousands of years. When we talk about influencers, although they didn't have Instagram and Facebook and X and all those things, 1,000 years ago, the symptom of what they're doing is identical. And we didn't even get to talk about what the government did in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and 60s, where they studied human condition. They studied what they could get humans to do. And how much of the population, what percentage of the population could they convince something is red when we know by looking at it that it's absolutely blue. We have to pay attention to it. And hope is not a strategy, but is definitely the thing that we have to hold on to as we start fighting this fight. But let me ask you this. Are we cooked? I started this conversation talking about deportations and drugs on the street and guns that Fast and Furious. We could go back and talk about what they did in Fast and Furious during the Obama administration. We could talk about the number of stories you had, like Russia collusion, and even if you could put your head around it, even how Patrick Byrne played a part in this dating back all the way to the World Trade Center bombings. And as people, we started looking at the reason why there's conspiracy theories is because the government itself is an organism that has not, it's not predetermined that it's going to tell the truth about anything. And when we talk about taxes, and we talk about, I had this conversation today specifically about taxes. And we talk about taxes. The taxes historically, if you want to go back biblically, or if you want to go back to the early days of the founding fathers and what they saw, you taxed goods, you did not tax people. You did not tax their wages because that was a form of immoral slavery or servitude. And yet we tax the wages of the individual at 56 cents on the dollar. And we also take, by the way, our pound of flesh on anything that we touch, any object or possession. I mean, we're in a pretty bad place right now, if you look at holistically. Because they want you to forget about the fact that they opened the borders and then they paid people to come into the border to create chaos for you. And now they're claiming that they're the saviors because they've kicked these people out. What do you think Pam Bondi was doing before she became the Attorney General? I'll tell you, she was in Florida, a part of the mechanism of the judiciary down in Florida. Well, what was Marco Rubio doing? He was in Congress. He was responsible for some of the same things that happened during those 4 years or the years before, if we want to talk about Ted Cruz and that we have to stand up for Israel. And by the way, I just don't want people to die, so I'm for humanity. But then we don't ask questions about what happened on October 7th. And why did it take them 6.5 hours to respond? And why were they told to stand down? And why is it when I go out in the media and I look for this information, you can no longer find it? Because they've cleaned it, cleaned the media. And why is it they can pick up the phone and call the CIA, call anybody they want and say, hey, we need to attack Joe Oltmann. We need to attack, we need to attack, we need to attack, we need to attack. Why is it that we find ourselves in this place where, frankly, nothing makes sense? Well, I'm going to tell you why. It was designed that way. It was designed that way. It was a system that was specifically designed to make the American people victims, to create enough chaos and enough holes in the boat that you run around just kind of chasing all of the holes in the boat, that you never get to solving any of the majority of the problems that exist. Because what would politicians do if you had to do that? And why, by the way, just an off deal, I'm just going to off the cuff say this. There was legislation that was just introduced, and the legislation was that they want to ban insider trading inside of Congress. And the majority leader in the House and the majority leader in the Senate got together and said, I think we're going to send people home just because there was such enthusiasm on the Democrat and the Republican side, bipartisan favoring, to say, yeah, we should get rid of that. And in the midst of all that, just so you know, they put a bill out also to give the people in Congress a raise. That just happened. There's a bill right now that will empower and give Congress another raise. Are we cooked? You got Kardashian Patel and you got Dan Bongino, and I think Dan Bongino is deeply conflicted because he's smart enough to know that the machine is bigger than him, but he's also carries just enough cowardice that he's not willing to stand up against it. See, he doesn't have FU money because at the end of the day, FU money means that he has to look over his shoulder always. And he's willing to play the game because I think he figured out what's on the inside. Who really runs it, and it's not who we think. President Trump keeps trying to bring people to the forefront to represent America's interests. And every time that he does, he is met with the same amount of force. The same playbook that happened in 2017 and 2018 is identical. It is identical. We had the House, we had the Senate, we had the presidency, and the people that actually slowed down progress were the people that said they were on our side. I want to show you this if I can. At the beginning of 2025 and through and up to the beginning of 2025, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, this is after President Trump got into office. And I'm going to walk through a series of what's happening and the fact that I'm just going to question right now, why are we not arresting these people? Why are we not arresting governors, attorney generals, secretary of states? Why haven't we signed the Insurrection Act? Why haven't we built? I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why. Because the stable is not deep. Mr. President, I personally will come and do whatever job is necessary. But you got to do something. And you got people like David Clements, you have people on the inside. You got Michael Flynn. People are like, oh my gosh, I got Michael Flynn. He's, you know what? Put him in the office and see that he gets done. And we, by the way, have an obligation to tell the Senate Majority Leader and the House Majority Leader, shut down Congress. Just shut it down so that every one of the appointments that President Trump has gets put into position of authority. But they won't do that. You want to know why? Because they're too busy going after Marjorie Taylor Greene and telling President Trump that she's against him when she's not. And he's pissed. But he's pissed at the wrong people. He should be pissed at Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche. He should be pissed at the Congress people who are standing against the interests of the American people. He should be pissed at the idea that they would not use the nuclear option when we're going into a place where the nuclear option is the only thing we can do to save this country. Because if we do not end the filibuster, we're finished. If we do not get rid of machines and mail-in ballots and start massively replacing the people in Congress, when Marjorie Taylor Greene stood up, and I don't agree with all the stuff that she says, I don't agree with her lifestyle, I don't agree with the fact she gave up her 30-year marriage, I don't agree with any of it. And I don't have to. I don't have to walk 5 meters in her feet, 5 inches in her feet, in her shoes. I don't have to. But here's where I think that we've found the fork in the road. She grew a conscience and she's stood by it. Here's some of the things you don't know about Marjorie Taylor Greene. When they were doing voice votes in Congress, and they'll say, we want to pass this $700 billion bill to give money to the last of the Mohicans in Somalia. And it says all those in favor would be like, hey. All those opposed would be like, hey. It's like the A's have it. Or the yes has it. Boom, passes, 700 million. And she'll be like hammering, going, I want to have a vote. I want to actually record a vote. And she would force all the Congress. She did this on every bill. She did this across the board. She's like, okay, I want them to be on the record saying that they want to give $700 billion to the last Mohicans over in Somalia. And all of a sudden, you started seeing this stuff wasn't passing. And it was a pain in the ass because people had to come down and then they had to vote and then they had to do their job. I don't care if you like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't care. I can tell you this, the media can turn you against anyone. But have they turned you against Marco Rubio? Absolutely not. He had 100 out of 100 vote for him to be confirmed as Secretary of State. Everyone voted for him. You don't think that's a problem? When everyone thinks that they're okay, that means they're all in on it. Set that aside. How about Ted Cruz? Does the media go after Ted Cruz? Nope. How about Jim Johnson? I'm sorry, Jim Jordan. Anybody go after him? Nope. Mike Johnson? I mean, the more you get into it, the more you're just dealing with a bunch of thieves. And that they're all in on it on both sides. But I want to show you something because this is why they don't care about the American people. And if we had a jelly bean jar, the jar is the federalist system and the jelly beans are the state system. They all are encompassed in one. But the federal government is the ability to protect its people. It's designed to protect the federation of states, the holistic nature of the states. Well, here's what Pritzker has done since the beginning of 2025. Go ahead and play it.
A report now on sanctuary policies in the state of Illinois. Immigration and Customs Enforcement saying that Governor Pritzker is overseeing the release of more than 1,700 dangerous criminal illegal aliens since the 20th of January, including murderers, pedophiles, and kidnappers, sending them back into neighborhoods and putting American lives at risk. It is turnstile justice, and there's more of that coming up.
Okay. Here's this. Pritzker has a bill called HB 1312. You're going to want to hear about this. Play it.
These set of laws set limits on where exactly federal agents could make immigration arrests. This comes, of course, after the state legislature passed a package of legislation following widespread immigration crackdown across the Chicagoland area. Today, Governor Pritzker did sign that package of legislation, this taking place at the Little Village Community Church. The state of legislation bans immigration arrests at or near courthouses. It also requires colleges, universities, hospitals, and daycares to set up policies for dealing with immigration enforcement and prohibits these establishments from disclosing the immigration status of students, patients, and children. Last month, a daycare worker was arrested by federal agents in Roscoe Village at the start of the school day. The governor says these laws expand legal protection for Illinois residents as immigration enforcement continues.
Our people have been forced to live in fear. Everyday activities like dropping off the kids at school, going to the park with your family, going to the doctor, showing up at your job has meant risking your safety and your livelihood. Fear and intimidation have been visited upon us by fellow Americans. It's unconstitutional.
These new laws also allow residents to sue federal officers who violate their constitutional rights. Now, the Department of Homeland Security has reiterated that they are going after the worst of the worst during these operations. We also reached out to the Department of Homeland Security for comment regarding the governor's actions he took today, I should say, and we are waiting to hear back from DHS.
All right, let me ask you a question. When did it become a play where you could do something and break the law and they become our people? Tell me how that happened. And this is the soup salad of the left and the lack of just any sort of character on the right. Stolen elections have consequences. They've been stealing elections for a long time. They have massively stolen the character and the ethos of our nation, and we're sitting here watching it happen. But here's what's happening. Republicans they're standing up, right? Wink, wink, eye, eye. Let's create chaos, another hole in the boat. And they're talking about how do ICE rioters in Illinois know to show up at the exact time and place that they're doing it. It's an inside job. Play it.
You will be held accountable for your actions. You will be held accountable for your actions.
We are in Maple.
SRT, let's move. Sir, go back, go back. Do not attack the agent! I'm trying to help! Okay? 608, 608.
Any more left back there?
You identify who is trying?
Most people, by the way, don't care if you kick out rapists and murderers, but these people do. So we protect the evil and we allow the good people to become victims of these people. Over 1,700 people who have committed rape, murder, assault, all being protected by a governor that wants to tell you that the federalist part of our country doesn't exist anymore. This is Mayor Johnson in Chicago is saying something as ridiculous and preposterous as it could possibly be. And that's just coming from people who are in Chicago that are like, this is unbelievable. Play it.
We are the transformation that this city is looking for, but make no mistake about it, there are those who are intimidated by this level of power, right? Because in some instances, those who held the power before are living in their own guilt and shame. And so they are intimidated by this sight, but we have to demonstrate to the rest of the world what it means not just to come together for our people, but how our liberation benefits all.
How our liberation benefits it all. And if that wasn't enough, the communist Zohan Mandami, he's chosen his new advisor on public safety. You're not gonna, I mean, we're off the rails. I mean, if you want to talk about, we're in a place of absolute sedition, we are. His name is Myson Lennon. He served 7 years for armed robberies targeting New York City taxi drivers. One victim was beaten with a bottle, another was held at gunpoint. Cash and jewelry were stolen. He was offered a 1-year plea deal, but he turned it down. The jury found him guilty anyway, and he ended up serving 7 years. This guy. He is the appointed head of public safety. Public safety, so you have the cartels that are just basically putting cartel members in positions of trust and authority. Our government is right? And the people literally are the ones that get held hostage by these diabolical people. I want you to hear this. This is President Trump on a hot mic calling out Republicans. You know what? He signals it. He signals it because we know what we're dealing with. Now we know that he knows. Play it.
Hey, Jeff, you know I cannot appoint anybody. Huh? I can't appoint anybody. Everybody I've appointed, their time is expired. And then they're in default. And then we're losing cases because
Then they're in default. And then we lose. These are traitors. It's not the Democrats. At least you know who the Democrats are. At least you know they're a bunch of nutbags that are putting convicted criminals, felons, in the driver's seat. No. It's the Republican, the slimy little shitbag GOP. They're trash. You know, I truly believe that Elon Musk stepped out of Doge and left because he's like, you are not changing this. He figured out, he's like, he looked up and he lifted the curtain, saw the wizard, and he's like, yeah, so they're going to start bombing Tesla stations and hurting people, and nothing would change. He went in to shut things down, and these Kabuki judges are like, oh, you're not allowed to do that. Well, we're headed towards a globalist society. There's nothing you can do about it. I think personally we're on the knife's edge, and it is about to go kinetic. Why? Because we're sick of all these. They want to destroy our country. And it's not the left. It's people that say that they're on our side. They wink, wink, nod, nod, free Tina Peters, the Benny Johnsons of the world that say, oh, this is my beautiful family. And I'm sorry to attack Benny Johnson, but the guy literally just ran on with this guy, Brian Cole. He is the pipe bomber, when you know he's not the pipe bomber. You use influencers in order to just strip out and create lies, and that's all they've ever done, while making sure that they silence, not just me. I'm not the only one. But first they destroy you first. First they did the wrap-up smear and doing all the smears that they do, even though the evidence is showing everything that I've said has been absolute 100% truthful to the end. You're not going to believe this. Attorney General Chris Mays, and Chris Mays is the Attorney General in Arizona who asked for more DEA agents because they need to help fight the Mexican drug cartels. Not only did she not send the additional 50 agents, but she took 60 back. Go ahead and play it.
If you could have the resources you wanted, what would they be? What would you be doing in order to truly limit the amount of fentanyl that is coming in this country?
So, recently I sent a letter to Pam Bondi, and I said, Dear Pam, please send me an additional 50 DEA agents at a minimum down here to Arizona, because these are the folks that help me fight the Mexican drug cartels. And not only did she not send me 50 additional DEA agents, she actually took 60 DEA agents out of Arizona and took them to places like Washington, D.C. so they could patrol Foggy Bottom and pick up trash and run around after immigrants. That is not what we need. What I would call upon Pam Bondi and Donald Trump to do is to bring us back these agents and bring them back to do their actual jobs. And I will tell you, I know these folks. They want to be going after the Mexican drug cartels. They want to be protecting this country against the scourge of these drugs. They want to be going after money laundering. We have 1 out of every 10 federal prosecutors now doing immigration enforcement, where they should be going after these drug cartels. Those are the kinds of resources we need, and we need a president who will allow them to go back to do their jobs.
I just saw the comment where it said, Joe, she needs more time. By this time, there was over 800 Americans that were sitting in a gulag. Don't tell me you need more time. Well, we don't have military tribunals yet. Go get them. You're sitting in the middle of an insurrection right now. Sign the Insurrection Act. Do whatever it is necessary. Pull the Band-Aid off. Wait till the day after Christmas. I don't care. Signal to us that something is happening, Pam Bondi. Signal. Do something. Not more bullshit about we're going to investigate. Get Tina Peters out of jail. How about that? How about you just walk in there with a strong arm and say, listen, she is a witness in a federal crime, and these states committed the crime. We're taking her. What are they going to do? Tell them no? Oh, well, you can't do that. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You just choose not to. So if you choose not to, how do you expect us to stand up for you, Pam? Here's a harsh but much needed message from all of us to you, Pam. And you know what? I literally said, okay, maybe, benefit of the doubt. I'm done with the benefit of the doubt. I'm done with it. I'm done. You don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. Why would you deserve? Okay, let's just go. Let's go on and let's talk about all the points of hopium that we got. Oh yeah, we're coming in, guns a-blazing. President Trump did everything he possibly could on day one. And these people have stood in his way the entire time. But I've seen some of the round robin meetings. President Trump has to be shaking his head like, if this was my company, he would have fired all of them. He would have fired them all, every single one of them. Okay, you hire slow, fire fast. He would have fired all of them. But he has to contend now with the media, and he has to contend with getting a new person put in office. So now he's stuck, and we, on the other hand, get the bearer of it, and we want to go after President Trump. I know he's looking at it like, I cannot believe I got bamboozled again. Play it.
A message to Attorney General Pam Bondi from Jeremy Harrell at LFA TV and pretty much everybody else in this country who put it all on the line to vote for Donald J. Trump 3 times. Why does it take Donald Trump to have to go on Truth Social to get you to do your damn job? Everybody knows you're not doing your job. Everybody. Everybody knows that the Somalians are guilty. Everybody knows that Schiff and Swalwell and all these people are guilty. Nobody cares anymore about, the rogue judges. The last administration didn't care about that. They locked people up in gulags and they gave them no due process. And now you're running out the clock, Pam Bondi, and you're making Trump look bad and you're making MAGA look bad. You are a problem in the administration. It's pretty bad when we have to call it out, knowing that Donald Trump may even get mad at us for calling it out. But we're going to call it out. There is very few of us who think that you're doing your job, Pam Bondi. And if anybody loses any elections, it's going to be based on the fact that that promise and that promise alone wasn't kept. We know Donald Trump is working 20 hours a day for America. There's not much more he can do. So what does he do? He delegates to people like you, Pam Bondi, to do your damn job. Why is it taking so long? Why are you filing in districts where you know you're going to lose? Why are you weak? Why do every time we see you, you say your lips are firmly placed to President Trump's ass, but you're not going after the people who have committed the crimes? We already know that they're guilty. We don't need you to do another Fox News hit. We don't need you to go on and do a press conference and act all tough by saying, because of President Trump's leadership, we are coming after you. You will find nowhere where you can hide from this Justice Department. They don't have to hide. All they have to do is go to work every day. You got Adam Schiff talking shit every day. You've got Eric Swalwell talking shit every single day. What about Fannie Willis? What about Jack Smith? You really need to have time to investigate? We already know the laws they broke. What about Ilhan Omar, who we know married her brother because we've seen the documents and we've seen the testimony? What are you waiting for, Pam Bondi? If Trump replaces anybody in the administration, it should be you. Everybody knows it. It's pretty bad when Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat, goes harder than you do. It's pretty bad when a former Rhino establishment man like Marco Rubio is the star of the administration. It's pretty bad when RFK goes harder than you do. Pam Bondi, you have been weak. You've been inefficient. And I don't care how good of a job President Trump tries to say you're doing. We know different. Get off your ass and do your damn job, or vacate the seat and put somebody there that will. That's my message to Pam Bondi. If you agree with it, share it. If not, I don't know what to tell you.
Shout out to Jeremy. It's a message we all been thinking and talking about. We're done. We're 11 months in. You want to run the clock? We know what you're running the clock for. You just watched as Miami went to a Democrat. They had 36,000 votes. 36,000 votes in Miami. Really? You believe that? 36,000 votes in the city of Miami. Go ahead and tell me how many people were in Miami. Ready for this? 498,000. 9% showed up. Do you believe it? See, the whole thing is rigged. The entire thing is rigged. It's rigged all the way to the end. I just said there's no way, it's not even possible 36,000 people only showed up. But there is no enthusiasm, I will agree. They have sucked all the air out of the room. They killed Charlie Kirk and they replaced it with a bunch of nonsense. And Pam Bondi says, oh, we're gonna go check on how they treat people inside the prisons in Colorado. They treat them like shit. It's a for-profit prison system where they let drugs and everything else come through it at their own whim. Because it's run by the cartel. What do you think was going to happen? You have the criminals running the roost. They put the drugs out there, then they arrest people, put them in prison, make them pay 25 cents for every minute, make people on the outside pay a tax to the prison so they can hold them there. Let violent criminals out there so they can commit other crimes against people in our society. And then when they finally do something to kill someone, then after being arrested 100 times, now they'll do something about it. Because they're too busy on the side of the road like they did with Eric Coomer, negotiating on how they can let this criminal walk the street. That's the reality. So is Make America Great bullshit? Is it dead? I don't know. Play this.
So for the first time in 28 years, the mayor of Miami gets elected and it's a Democrat. And people are like, where are the Republicans? Why didn't they show up? Why would they show up, bro? Where's the Epstein list? Where is the accountability for COVID and the scam that happened to all Americans, where the big corporations got bigger and the mom and pop shops had to close, where they literally shut down the truth about medications that were helping people and watched them die? What about justice for the people that were mandatorily required to get the vaccine? They got it, and now they're having heart issues because they're DMing me all the time. Some of them 1 foot in the grave. Where's the accountability for the freaking Russiagate scandal, where the actual president of the United States plotted and told the mainstream media to go along with it while they lied to everybody and tried to subvert the will of the American public by making everybody think that Trump was involved with Russia? Where's the accountability? I'm glad Trump sealed the border, but we're having slower deportation rates than Obama did. And at this pace, it's not going to put a dent in it. How's your guys' grocery bills, by the way? Way lower? Mine aren't. My gas is down 40 cents. Neat. Everything else, still shit. Now, it's only been a year, Ross. You got to give these things time. We don't have any time, bro. Do you know how fast the Democrats move when they're actually in power to flush everything down? They don't ask permission before they implode the country. They ask forgiveness. But except they don't actually ask for forgiveness because nobody even tells them anything about it because none of them are being held accountable, bro. They just seem to magically get away with it. Where's the accountability? Why would Republicans show up to vote? They should, because the last thing we want is to see what's going to happen if they don't. But it's starting to feel like the two wings of the same bird thing. Like, bro, you shot all the people that we like. Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene. These people at least said stuff that we're thinking. And Trump hates them to death and loves Lindsey Graham? What? The dude who nonstop desires to go to war? It's hard to care about politics. The only thing I can tell people to do is to get really proficient at business and get proficient at using social media for business, because at least you can make progress in this category. And I'd love to help you do it. I take people by the hand and show them how to become successful at social media and successful at the business side of social media so that you can actually grow. Links in the bio. I'd love to help you. But honestly, that's the basket I put my eggs in now, is how do I become independently successful so that regardless of how stupid the leadership is, I'm capable of thriving. And I'm in a position now where I think you should be doing the same thing, dude. Yeah, get out there and vote, because the alternative is terrible if you don't. But at the same time, call these people out and tell them that we demand a certain amount of accountability. And if we don't get it, that only leaves us one option, bro. And nobody wants to see that.
Well, all the old shit people in Congress, those are the good people. So here, I'm going to start something. I want you guys all to do this for me. Here's the exercise that I want you to do. At Dave Clements, I want you to do this. I want you to go, and let me just tell you what his handle is on X. I want you to do it on all platforms. Let's see if I can find it. It is at the PROFS record, at the Prof's record. I want you to put I want you to tag POTUS, at POTUS. Replace Pam Bondi with David Clements. I already know David will go to the mat. I already know that he's out there fighting. I already know it. He puts that story out every single Sunday. I already know. So I'm just going to tell you right now, go to every one of the links. Go to the video that we have right now. If you're watching it right now and you're on any channel, I want you to say at the prof's record should be the Attorney General, and then tag POTUS, at POTUS. And if you're on Facebook, do the same thing. You have to find it. I think it's at David Clements, and find him there. And if you're on Rumble, just put it in the comments. At the professor's record, let it be said that 1,000% that Dave Clements would be a pick for Attorney General because he gives zero shits. If there were shits to be given, he'd be like at negative 5,000. And he has a bone to pick, and blood is all he's searching for right now, is that he wants the people, he wants the devil's blood. He wants them to pay. The person that should be the Attorney General is someone that cannot be bought. The person that should be the Attorney General is someone that, frankly, has done nothing but just been centered, God-centered, but also has been a warrior. That's David Clements. %100%. Not 50%, not 20%. I want you to put it on everything. Hit literally go and put it on every social media and make sure you tag David Clements. You tag him and you say, you need to be the Attorney General of the United States. That has to happen. This woman put something up, and she's sick of the GOP. She's not even it's not the GOP. We don't even know who runs the GOP right now. It's all bullshit. The whole thing's bullshit. So out of touch, man. Out of touch with reality. Play it.
Good morning from sunny South Carolina. Did you see the mayor's race in Miami last night? That was disappointing. I remember years ago when Ronna McDaniel was in charge of the RNC, and I was like, man, she really sucks. She's not doing a good job. We need to replace her. And we did. And I don't even know who replaced her because they aren't doing a very good job either. I am so sick of the GOP altogether. Can't believe I'm saying this, but I am. I'm finally going to say, maybe we do need a third party. Republicans, you guys are spineless. You have no balls. You guys do nothing to support Trump and the agenda. Democrats, you guys are impeachment crazy, love illegal immigrants. You want boys in girls' bathrooms. You guys are mentally ill. Maybe we could have the party of America, the American Party, the Patriot Party, maybe the I'm tired of both sides bullshit party. I don't know, but this isn't working. Okay, this isn't gonna work much longer because neither party really cares about us. And either you don't want to believe it or you don't see it, you're naive, or maybe you do, because I could support people like John Fetterman. Yeah, I don't agree with some people on everything, but there's gotta be a better way. GOP, I'm sick of you. I really am.
Tell me what they've done that's been good for us at all. They hate the pro-life movement. They just have a pro-life movement just so they can say. The Heritage Foundation came out and said, oh, there's not mass amounts of election fraud, but there are cases of it, even though internally, by their own words, they said it's massive and every election in this country is compromised and not real. But then the left uses their own word against them and say, well, it's a Republican that's doing this. It's not a Republican. It's a demon in Prada. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's a coward. It's a piece of shit that frankly doesn't deserve anything from us. The American people are being held hostage by demons and cowards. That's the reality. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. Neither one of you are happy right now. And you're not happy because they don't give a shit about you. They just raised taxes in Colorado again. by another 2.5%. They decided that if you do really well and you make over $300,000, that you have to pay whatever you got on your entitlement discount at the federal level, which you shouldn't have to pay taxes on your wages. You shouldn't. But that money that you get on that, no, you have to give it to the state of Colorado. So you're not entitled to any sort of reprieve by the federal. We haven't taken enough from you. That's Colorado. Maybe it's time for a third party. Maybe it's time for a second party. I mean, think about it this way. We don't have a second party. The Republican Party is rotted to the core at every level. And everyone says, well, Joe, that's all you got. But don't worry about it. You have Conservative USA. You got Connick. You got all these different influencers say, we're winning. We're so winning. We're winning. We haven't won one thing. That's not true. We won in Tennessee. We won in Tennessee. In a plus 35 Republican area. The bad part about where we're at right now is you guys don't even pay attention. You don't even do the things that are necessary in order to get it done. I'm sitting here looking at it. Not one of you has actually tagged the professor. You got 390 of you or 400 people on X that are watching right now. Not one of you went in there and tagged the professor because you don't believe it. Because you're like, oh yeah, but I don't really know. He's never been an attorney general. You don't need to be a captain of a boat to push the paddle. You don't need to be a professional map reader to drive a car. There's something called the Captain Obvious. President Trump, before he got into office, had no political experience. They're like, oh, it's going to be a total disaster. And it was the complete opposite. Energy prices went down for Americans. More money went into their pocket. We went through a great amount of prosperity. Things were really great. And then they dropped COVID on us. And we've forgotten more about what they did to us. They victimized Americans and people around the world. But more Americans, because millions of Americans died at the hands of these diabolical pieces of shit. But you forgot about it. You lost your grandmothers, your sisters, your brothers. Some of you are still having to be forced to get a COVID vaccine. And it killed some other people and maimed some of you. But if you're in Canada, by the way, their solution to if you're vaccine injured is euthanasia. Just kill yourself. I know we did harm to you. Now, we've never addressed Big Pharma. We've never addressed the big 500,000-pound gorillas we know are problems in our country. We can't even arrest somebody for committing crimes against Americans during the 4-year hiatus, or whatever you want to call they did, this holiday of evil that they had during the Biden administration. Now, we're good. We still have the Supreme Court at least. Do we? I couldn't have put it any better than what was just put here on this. This is a post. If the left regains power, what do you think happens if the left regains power? Well, let me just tell you what happens if the left regains power. This should make you happy. If the left regains power, there'll be a crackdown on social media speech. It's already happening, by the way, on TikTok. Try to be a conservative and operate anywhere where you actually say anything about the better or greater good. You cannot do it. And we had it to where we got rid of TikTok. It was gone. Like, take it down, get rid of it. No. It became the big bad wolf that now gets to act with impunity. And the only thing you see is them bashing cops and the radical left agenda. It's all you see. Furries and gay people. That's it. That's America today. Mass amnesty for 30 million new voters. They can't get them out fast enough. Why? Because you can't get any sort of cooperation by the insurrection that's happening in our country. You can't get anything from it. How are you going to get people out if they just want to protect murderers and rapists and things like that, put them back on the street, make sure that we can release all those people out there, and then send out a band of 100 protesters to cause harm to the ICE agents who are just doing their job? End the filibuster and pack SCOTUS. So we didn't end this filibuster because we got a bunch of cowards and people that really are on the radical left, but they will when they get back into power, and they're going to get back into power because we're not going to get rid of machines and mail-in ballots. And then they're going to have nationwide mail-in and no voter ID. And then 52 states are going to make D.C. and Puerto Rico states, because why not, right? Why not? You've already captured everything. You own the entire ethos of our nation. You've destroyed everything. You got pornography in second, first grade. Hell, when they come out of the womb, just put them in front of some porn and convince them that when they're a baby that they just want to be a boy. Matter of fact, being a boy, just make them into kitty cats. That's what's going to happen when the left regains power. They're going to abolish the Electoral College, make it mob rule. MAGA is going to be arrested and debanked. And once the left takes power, they'll make sure we never get it back again. We knew going into this that would be the case. They killed Charlie Kirk. They killed everything that's good about debate because they were so afraid of the people, the kids in these schools that were listening to Charlie Kirk. He was starting a revolution at the most basic level, at the place where the plant is just starting to grow. Now, we're going to take it from them. See, there are no consequences. And when the people that start victimizing people become and see themselves as a victim, we have mental illness at a whole new level in our country. The last thing I'll leave with you is this. This is an arrest of a liberal old woman who didn't like what the guy was wearing. He didn't like her shirt. Play it.
Hi, Alexandra. So here's the situation. Yesterday you had an incident in there, correct?
All right. Okay.
There are charges for battery. I'm going to have to place you under arrest for battery.
You're trying to arrest me?
Yes,
Did you know what he did to me? Threatened me. They said, I'm gonna shoot. I'm gonna shoot. He started it. See? He pushed me again. I didn't do anything. I just stepped in front of me, and I said, well, I don't like what you're wearing. This is crazy. I'm just citizen, law-abiding citizen. I didn't come here to make some crimes. This is so unjust.
It's so unjust. George Floyd could take a knife, put it to the belly of a pregnant woman, be arrested over and over and over again. They arrest the cop because he's passing counterfeit money. A known drug dealer and a guy that basically has terrorized the neighborhood. But no, he is the poster child for police brutality. Only we found out that wasn't the case, but Derek Chauvin's still in jail. And I'm not an apologist for the police. Not at all. I think good cops are good cops, bad cops are bad cops. I think more often than not, we expect people to be virtuous and be good people. Frankly, it doesn't always happen. You got to take the good with the bad. But that's not what's happening in our society right now. It's not what's happening in our country, in our state. It's not happening anywhere. We're captured by evil people that see you as an inconvenience, but they also see you as a slave. This is what's happening everywhere. This is not, a small part. I mean, you could go on TikTok. You will have 100 people, 1,000 people, 2,000. There's no shortage of videos where they're saying, hey, I need your license registration. You're doing 55 and a 35. I wasn't doing that. I'm not giving you anything. Cause chaos. Just hoping that the cop slips up and makes a mistake while he's actually executing the arrest. But then the courts step in and they're like, you can't arrest her because she's black. So you got this entire sense of entitlement. It's like they took the playbook out. And then you have to use the race card while they basically demoralize and lie about white people. It's unbelievable. What's the answer? Get rid of machines and mail-in ballots. Ask President Trump to get rid of Pam Bondi and replace her with someone that's sensible. His name is going to be David Clements. I think David Clements will walk in and he'll just start arresting people. And you said one side you have grand juries, the other one is that you can have a warrant for their arrest. Write up the paperwork, have them arrested. More often than not, one is used, the other isn't used. The judges are still rotted out to the core, which means you're going to have military tribunals, or you're going to have to sign the Insurrection Act and get to a place where you can have sensibility, because if we don't reset things across this country, we are finished. And we don't have any more time. There is no more time. If We have primaries for things that are coming up in February, March, and April. And leaving this country is going to be a mass exodus. But where do we go? Russia? We go to Russia? Is that the place we end up going to? Or the only place where some sensibility? How about China? Maybe we just go to China. Just go live with the Chinese. Because they're ultimately the enemy, right, of the radical left? I don't know. Where do we go? You can't go anywhere. If we don't save this country, we have nothing to go back to. There's nothing left. They're going to take everything from us. And then ultimately, I'm going to tell you, well, the World Economic Forum has not missed in the last 20 years. They have not missed. Global climate change, you still hear about this global climate change. You don't hear much about it right now. Why? Because they're putting that aside while they have all the rest of the chaos that they're creating. But they're coming to get rid of 95% of the world. They want to murder you. So we either get free and fair elections and return the voice back to the American people, or you all are going to die. That's what I think. Me too. I'll die fighting. All right. I don't have anything else. You guys have anything else? Pray for Tina. Pray for our president. Today, you all are going to pray. I'm not ending it in prayer. You pray. I asked you guys to do something. You didn't do that. So now you pray. You can stop at the end of the show. The show's going to be over. I want you to go pray. How about you pray and stand up and speak and act? You do the things that are necessary collectively to stand together. It's not my job to do it. It's not my job to always do it for you. It's not anybody else's job either. If we don't start doing something ourselves and say we don't want to Pam Bondi, and we don't start actually standing up together, we have no country left. We'll be done. That's all I have. Check out the Facts Blast. It'll be on all the socials. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and more. Share it if you want. Don't if you don't. But we had a great guest today, and frankly, yeah, I'm pissed. I'm pissed because we have Peter Tickton and a lot of other people doing great things, and we're all recognizing, and here's what they tell us. It's more complicated. It's not, though. The left has shown us that it's not complicated at all. You just got to have the fortitude to do the right thing. That's pretty tough because that requires courage. It requires commitment to the American people, which I don't think we have much of. So there you go. God bless you all. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Rise up untamed in the heart of the fight where the wild ones roam. Joe Oltmann's calling, bringing truth back home. From conservative daily to this untamed fire, we shatter the silence, lifting spirits higher. No chains can hold us, no lies can prevail. Authentic and fearless on this rugged trail. Patriots gather under stars and stripes. Untamed nation, igniting the night. Untamed nation, let the truth roll out in this land of the free. Standing proud from sea to shining sea, we won't back down. Catch the fire, wear the crown. Untamed nation, it's our battle song, motivating hearts where the brave belong. Yeah, untamed and wild, forever strong. Play it again all night long. Time to heal. Joe's voice leads the untamed crew.